had some lunch, Dad. Coleslaw and quiche.
I hate quiche.
Then why did you take it?
I thought it was pie.
The double feature podcast that celebrates all movies from the sublime to the suspicious. As always, I'm Lindsay Wilkins, and this episode has been months in the making. It's a double of Denis Villeneuve's Oh No, What Is Wolverine Doing? To piece, Prisoners, and J. Lee Thompson's Canon Sleaze piece, 10 to Midnight. Oh yeah, this is a double you absolutely would want to shower afterward, though not the one that Paul Dano has. And with me as a person, I've already been geeking out about this double for about months. We've just been going over it and over it. It is, of course, the one and only Preston Mitchell. Hey, how's it going?
It's going super well over here. How are you doing, Lindsay?
I am doing really well. I'm so excited to actually, well, we've been talking about this double for a while, so it's we've already been geeking out. But I'm really excited to get into it. This is going to be absolutely fantastic.
It is. I've been a fan of both these movies for quite some time. I mean, things have been getting really hot in Texas. I mean, now that we're nearing the end of summer, like we finally been getting some like a little bit of a breeze. Granted, the breeze is like a 90 degree one, but hey, you know, I'll take what I can get.
I know that 90 degrees coming off a desert wind well.
Definitely. But yeah, I'm just happy to be here and talk about some occult movie, some fine film, and talk about all the great stuff in between. I feel like this, out of all the doubles, I feel like I've come onto, you know, your wonderful show about. I feel like this one really epitomizes the schlock and the awe.
It really does.
If you agree.
I really do. I don't think, I mean, we'll get into it, but Canon is kind of the master of the schlock. And I think 10 to Midnight is one of their more schlockier ones. And they made a lot of fantastic schlock. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it. And yeah, and Prisoners is just pure Villeneuve. So yeah, we're going awe and shock, but because Prisoners is so sad, we just need a bit of a lighter touch with a naked man running around with a knife.
There's definitely a lot of there was way more dude ass in this one than I remember. I know what the movie's about, naked serial killer, but I was just like, man, I thought there was gonna be I remember there being more diverse nudity than that, but you know, that's just me.
Yeah, I thought there was more nudity in it, but I forgot how much butt there was in it. And Thompson really gets that camera in there. If that makes any sense.
Just all up in there.
Oh my God, it's all up in his business. That actor had to he's so vulnerable. Just this camera sticking in his ass for days on end.
Oh goodness.
But yeah, before we get into it, you have been podcasting some amazing episodes, especially the fact that you went on Cobwebs with Carmelita Valdez and talked about one of the movies that has the most movie in it, and that of course is Lawrence of Arabia.
Definitely. No. Shout out to Daniel Epler for having myself and Carmelita back on there to talk about it, and it was amazing conversation. It was one of those Lawrence of Arabia is one of those classics that is very near and dear to me. It's a movie that means a lot to me. That filmmaker means a lot to me, and as we talk about one of these movies tonight. I actually think he's going to come up quite a few times.
He is.
But Carmelita really brought the knowledge. Daniel is always a great facilitator, wonderful, amazing host, and was very open to indulging in the movie with Carmelita myself. So I hope if people haven't listened to it, definitely check it out. If you're a fan of classic film and that kind of thing, and out of probably it's one of the podcasting moments I'm the proudest of this year. So thank you again, Daniel.
No, Daniel is an amazing host. He's an absolute pro. And we've talked off mic about how I'm not the biggest fan of that classic epic, as we'll get into when we talk about, I'm a fan of Prisoners, don't get me wrong. But there is a tendency for Villeneuve to go full lean, epic lean. Yeah, so it's kind of fascinating what genres you tend to gravitate toward and ones you kind of have to learn to appreciate. I think those 50s epics, which you put Lawrence Arabia, though, I think that was 61?
62.
You can definitely put in that thing, but I get a little bit exasperated with things like Ben-Hur with Jesus standing there for 5 minutes while everyone's wanting water. I was just like, just get more water. Dude, stop it. You're just posing. And the whole Jesus reign, I'm not even going to get in my Ben-Hur right now. Freaking Jesus reign. Yes, that was an amazing episode, and please, if you haven't listened to it, check it out. Even if you think you get a little bit tired like me with Lawrence, it gives you such an appreciation for what that movie is actually trying to do and how revolutionary it was. You got to remember that people knew the genre, but they hadn't quite seen what lean was about to do to it, which again, I think we can talk about Denis Villeneuve and kind of similar tones, especially what he does with certain genres. So we might as well just get into it. We're going to start off with Prisoners. Now, Preston, we're going to be sitting in the theater for the first 2.5 hours of this movie. What are you going to show as a trailer?
Sure. To start things off, I wanted to, because we are talking about an epic of sorts, but we're really getting into the first police procedural of the night, and Prisoners is really a really great noir in my opinion. And I wanted to start off with Kurosawa's great noir, Stray Dog.
取られた拳銃には弾は何発入ったそっくりボルトだったな取られたピストルはボルト式小型拳しかしどうも君は自分のコルトにばっかりこだわりすぎるなとそれを左手に握ってたんだその手はブルブル震えていたに違いない一応もないのに青くてぶっ放したやつだからね
Yes, I have not seen this in a while, but oh my God, this blew me away when I first saw it. Amazing pick.
Thank you. Yeah, this is probably, I don't mean to say this as a hot take, but this is probably my favorite Kurosawa movie. Like there's something about this and High and Low and a couple of others that speak to me a little bit more than his samurai epics. Obviously, if you've heard me on previous podcasts, you know I'm a fan of the epic type of film, but and I'm definitely a fan of Seven Samurai, and I think Seven Samurai as a whole is one of the great movies ever made. But I love Stray Dog because it's Kurosawa at his most deceptively simple, because the movie literally begins with Toshiro Mifune, his muse. He's a young and inexperienced detective on the Tokyo police force, and he rides a bus in the heat of the summer, and he loses his gun. And him being, kind of new to the force and everything, that's not exactly good, especially in context of a post-war Japan where economics are everything. And so he goes on a journey, dives literally head deep into the slums and the poverty. And ends up, touching fate with the criminal underworld quite a few times in the film, while he's juxtaposed against, I believe his name is Takashi Shimura.
Yes.
Who is who's in several Toho movies of the period, like the original Godzilla, and of course he shares screen time in Seven Samurai with Toshiro Mifune, but. It's just a really, really dark for its time film. I hesitate to say for its time, it's really dark in any era. Because where the movie goes to, if you've watched other Kurosawa movies, you know that he doesn't shy away from the psychological or the cerebral, and it's magnificently shot. I believe it's one of the very first, in Japan at least, one of the very first police movies. Definitely long before the buddy cop movie trend, where they became way more comedic and that kind of thing. But yeah, Stray Dog is my pick.
No, that is an absolute amazing pick. Yeah, it is. This was 1949. Or
yes.
Yeah, so this is 4 years after the war ended, and there you've already got Kurosawa making one of the greatest noirs ever made, and kind of defining kind of where film goes in Japan forward. And I need to give it another watch actually, because I've just spent 2 minutes saying how much I don't love big epics, yet my favorite Kurosawa is Ran, which is a 3-hour epic. But that is maybe because it is one of his Shakespeare adaptations. The battle scenes in Ran are unreal. I
was gonna say if you have a whole day, like that would probably make honestly, if you have a whole weekend, that would probably make a great double feature with Lawrence of Arabia, because I feel like that's his. I feel like that's his David Lean movie.
It really is, and this is when we'll get into, if we're going to get into certain tastes and everything. This is where the contradictions come in. I don't want to watch Ben-Hur or what's the one where Moses with the parting of the, I think it's also Charlton Heston.
10 Commandments. Yeah. He was big on those.
Yeah, I don't particularly want to watch those, but you give me Ran, and I'm just suddenly like, yes, please. I will take that insanely long, intricate, multicolored movie where nature is a stage and it's all about the sky, which is what I'm starting to love about Kurosawa, is that he's very focused on clouds. But in the best metaphorical way of kind of, the other one would be Rashomon, which is, oh my God, if you want to talk about peak Mifune, just Rashomon is amazing, and he's amazing in it. But
Isn't
I
he
think
handsome in that movie?
Oh, he's so handsome. He's the worst, but he's so handsome in that movie. It's like me and Michelle were talking about, like, he's the worst, but yet how hot. It's he's like peak hotness in 1950. But it's a kind of a great introduction as into kind of the darkness that you will get into with this one. And this very existential, because the thing about Kurosawa is he was incredibly existential about the human condition. Again, something that a lot of Japanese and South Korean, because there might be a South Korean trailer coming up soon, comes up.
Oh.
Yeah. Which one though? I've got about 5 noted down. Yeah, it's kind of going into that kind of thing. And I think that is also what Villeneuve is leaning on as well, especially with Preston. So I think this is absolutely perfect. Okay, so for my first trailer, I'm actually going to go not South Korean, that would probably be my last one. I'm going to go for a much more hard-boiled version of this movie, and that is Gone Baby Gone from 2007, directed by Ben Affleck with his little brother.
If we don't catch the abductor by day 1, only about 10% are ever solved. This is day 3.
Do you know people in the neighborhood who don't talk to the police?
Want to?
We want to hire you to augment the investigation.
I just want my daughter back. It's all right. We're gonna find her. You have to promise me. I promise.
You ever investigated an abduction before?
I think Mr. McCready was hoping that we could help with the neighborhood aspect of this investigation.
Half the guys you know are degenerates.
Hey, you know what the other half are?
What?
Cops. Don't hold it against me.
Guess who? You asked me to find some people for you. I think I found them.
Are you saying you didn't do it? Fine. If it turns out you're lying, I'm gonna bribe cops to go after you, and I'm gonna tell everyone I know that you're a CI and a rat. And I know a lot of people.
This movie's great. It's kind of, I know Patrick Bromley has referenced The Town, his other one, which is kind of the standard all movies should be, just as good. And I think Gone Baby Gone is like that. It is just super hard-boiled. It's very Boston. Characters are making all kinds of wrong decisions, but decisions they are making from where they stand in society. I mean, Amy Ryan is amazing as the worst mother in the world. Yet you know what the right thing is. I don't know. Yeah, Gone Baby Gone is amazing.
I agree with you 100%. This is actually my favorite of the Ben Affleck directed films. kind of his Boston crime era, and of course I think Argo is really freaking good. But Gone Baby Gone I love because of how seedy and how unlikable and unscrupulous everyone is.
Yes.
And I mean, considering what we know Casey Affleck in real life,
he fits right in.
Yeah, he fits right in. Fits right in. But in all legitimacy, I think he's giving a great performance. I think Affleck, Casey Affleck, when given the right material, can really shine performance-wise. And Michelle Monaghan's in this movie, who
so good.
She's so good, and I wish she was in more stuff. And I think Gone Baby Gone is one of her best performances. I love how this movie. I'm typically not a big twist guy. Like I like the occasional twist. Like we're about to get into a movie where I feel like it's twist based, just coming from the formula that it's indulging in, but at the same time that's not the root of it. And I feel like too often do crime films crime films like Gone Baby Gone are too dependent on twists, so much so that it makes them hard to rewatch. Gone Baby Gone is a movie that every time it's on cable, I'm gonna sit down and probably crack open a beer and just watch it from beginning to end. And Morgan Freeman in the movie as well is excellent. So I love this pick.
No, this is a movie where your expectations of not just the twist, but the expectation of morals are completely turned upside down. But yeah, it is one of those movies where if it shows up on TV, you just have to watch the rest of it. I mean, Ed Harris is so good in this. Is it Ed Harris? Yeah, Ed Harris is so good in this movie. Yeah. And I can't remember if it's his wife, I think, is in it as well. I don't know. The cast is just one of those ones where you just want to sit down and watch it, very much like Prisoners. And it kind of, I think Prisoners has a much more clearer moral center. Gone Baby Gone doesn't. And it even works, the fact that you know what Casey Affleck is actually works for the movie. I think it makes it better because he's so awful that you're like, yeah, you just fit right into this horrible world that you're now having to investigate. And I think Ben Affleck is better when he's making really tight, concise movies. I think when he wants to go bigger and more bloated, I think that's when the wheels start falling off. As much as I like Argo, I start seeing that a little bit in there, because the moments in Argo I love when you are in that embassy, you're with Ben Affleck in Iran trying to get into that, you're just doing all these kind of things to try and get these people out. And that's when it's at its best. But Gone Baby Gone is all that. And yeah, it's just a good movie. What is going to be your second trailer for Prisoners?
Oh goodness, I might be the outlier in that I'm going a little bit light, but it's light that's disguising a very dark true story, and that's Bad Education from 2019.
Please join me in welcoming to the stage our district superintendent and my friend, Frank Tassell.
In Long Island, the town is only as good as its
public schools. The better the school system, the higher the price tag on the homes.
These are the best early decision numbers that we've ever seen.
I wanted to make a difference. I got us all the way to number 4, and I will get us to number 1.
Get us to first. That's all that matters.
Hey, Frank.
Yeah.
I've been doing some digging. I'm concerned with what I found.
I still have not seen this. I keep meaning to. Apparently Jackman's amazing.
He's amazing in it. And I picked this solely because, excuse me, I picked this movie solely because of Jackman's performance in it. And basically, sorry, Lindsay. Goodness. I picked this movie solely based on the strength of Jackman's performance. And essentially what it's about is it's about a superintendent who is in 2002 in Long Island. He is this like superhero basically who is able to put out these positive messages. He makes his school district look amazing. He works with an assistant superintendent played by the amazing Allison Janney, who brings it in this movie. And they end up having to cover an embezzlement that their administration is a part of, and it was a huge deal in the early 2000s. It's based on a 2004 New York Magazine article telling a true story of the largest public school embezzlement in American history, still to this day. And it's just a wonderful dark comedy. I forget it's directed by Corey Finley, who directed Thoroughbreds, which I hear is great.
Thoroughbreds is actually pretty good.
Yeah, and based on what I know about Thoroughbreds, it sounds like Bad Education is in that same category.
Yes.
And I know it won the Emmy for Outstanding TV Movie back in 2020. So, Lindsay, if you haven't seen Bad Education, I definitely would recommend it if you're in a Jackman mood. He does a great job, I think, of playing either anti-heroes, bad guys that you want to like, or people who are likable but are inherently just flawed. And I think he's one of those, like, people don't bring up Jackman a lot in this conversation, but I think he's like a Brad Pitt or a Chris Pine in that he's this really matinee movie star looking guy who's able to play wildly different characters and has an immeasurable range. And I think you see so much of that in Bad Education.
I think you do. I think what Hugh Jackman does as well is he's absolutely great at being the movie star, and he's absolutely great at being the showman.
Right.
And now he's kind of coming into his own and doing these other things like Chris Pine and Brad Pitt, where he can kind of do those other things. And you're like, so how talented actually are you? No, you can be one or the other. You can't do both. But he does occasionally will choose a kind of a role where knock it out of the park. And you were just like, I did not expect that you had that in you. And I think Prisoners is one of them. Just the ball of anger that this man is right from the get-go, even before his daughter goes missing in Prisoners, is there. Like, it's just waiting to come out. And now he has the catalyst and the excuse to do things to Paul Dano. It's kind of always been there, which is kind of the fascinating thing about thing. But no, I love that, and I need going on my watch list, and I do need to see it. So that sounds perfect. Yeah. Okay, so my second trailer, right? Okay, this is probably not the South Korean movie that fits with Prisoners the best, but I think it'll be a really good one to show in front of it. But I'm going for the original Old Boy from 2003, Park Wen. I'm butchering his name. I'll have to edit that in later. Anyway.
Park Chan-wook.
What happened to him?
He showed up last night.
I need your help, Chucky.
I haven't seen the guy in like 20 years.
Who are you?
If you were trying to find your daughter and clear your name, I could help you.
If you would like to see your daughter alive.
여기 뭐 때문에 들어왔는지 그것만 얘기 좀 해줘요. 예?
그때 그들이 15년이라고 말해줬다면 조금이라도 견디기가 쉬워졌을까? 아니었을까?
I was trying to Oh boy, it's amazing. He eats an octopus whole, and he was that actor's a vegetarian. Read a Letterboxd review of Mark Warner, who said this is Denis Villeneuve channeling the South Korean crime movies of the 2000s, which I think he does actually have a point. I went, yeah, Memories of Murder. An amazing movie called The Burning from 2019, if you haven't seen. Very amazing movie. I Saw the Devil. If you want nightmare kind of fuel of imagery, I Saw the Devil, it has that. But there's something about Old Boy where the twist is so dark that you can't actually comprehend about how this movie led to this point, about why this man is literally locked in a room for 15 years or something, and is just let out one day and when you realize the thing behind it and what's actually happening, you just have to go, wait, what? It's a brilliant twist, because not only don't you see it coming, you just can't comprehend what a person is willing to go through to cause someone else harm or get revenge. But yeah, Old Boy is an amazing, amazing movie.
Oh no, Old Boy is spectacular, and I have to agree with that Letterboxd review that you shouted out, because I think you see the DNA of Kim Ji-woon, definitely Park Chan-wook, and Bong Joon-ho in Villeneuve's Prisoners, and which is one of the reasons why I love it so much. And it's funny, I have to just admit this out from the blue, like I'm not super into Bong Joon-ho. Like I like him, but I find his movies to be very heavy-handed a lot of the time. But Memories of Murder, that's the one that works the most for me, and I think it's because it feels the most like a Prisoners, like an I Saw the Devil, like where it's just very dark and depraved and doesn't have time to make a message. And Old Boy is in that vein because, and I think it's textbook. Like it's a movie that I use whenever people are like, okay, why shouldn't you remake a great film? Because so much of what is great about Old Boy is its weirdness. Like everyone fixates on the outstanding fight scene that's shot in one take where he's fighting all those dudes. That is one of the great gifts that that genre film has ever given us, is that fight scene.
In fact, it was so good, Spike Lee just reenacted it when he did his remake.
Oh goodness, yeah. Oh man.
I mean, okay, not my favorite Spike Lee movie, but I will say Spike Lee recognizes good filmmaking because he is a good filmmaker. So he's just like, why don't I just do that scene again? Because it's awesome.
True. If you're gonna remake Old Boy, you might as well take a stab at that sequence.
Yeah.
That's true. I do love Spike for sure. But Old Boy I think is a great pick for this because I think there's a lot of weirdness in Prisoners.
Yes.
That is very much in line with how Old Boy ended up influencing so much of the media that we consume today. And it's bizarre to me that it took nearly 20 years for South Korean film to win, a Best Picture Oscar, but better now than never, I suppose. Yeah,
look, as much as I love Bong Joon-ho and I think Parasite is a masterpiece, that movie is not subtle. It is making very clear. I mean, the amount of times people are going upstairs who are wealthy, people are going downstairs who are not wealthy. I think it is very clear lines and very thing. But I just adore Bong Joon-ho, and I think Memories of Murder is his best movie, and that was his second goddamn movie. And then you're just sitting watching Memories going, this is this motherfucker's second movie. Seriously, he's coming out the gate with a masterpiece? What the hell? But when you watch Old Boy, and I don't think this was Park's, this was something like a third or fourth movie. But when you watch the confidence and poor Choi Yun-min Sik, who has to eat a whole octopus, there's this weirdness, there's this quirkiness, there's this kind of world that you don't know what's happening. And not only did it, influence every single South Korean movie that came afterward, it influenced, you start seeing it in every other people just seeing this movie going, oh my God. And you can see that influence of what South Korea was doing suddenly come up in American Hollywood movies in like the 2010s, and Prisoners is absolutely one of them. Although I also see a lot of Fincher and Lean in there as well, but Villeneuve has never been shy about, I don't think he's been particularly shy about his influences and how he likes to make movies. So
no, he's not Tarantino.
No, he's not quite Tarantino, but he's not shy about it either. Yeah, he's not one to steal a certain shot, but he is one to take a certain vibe. And within that, vibe is actually a really good word for Prisoners.
I checked the entire house. They're not here.
They weren't outside. It's starting to rain, I think. Dad, there was this RV, and they were playing on it. We thought there was someone inside.
You wait here. Let me go.
I couldn't find them.
911.
Detective Loki.
Do you have children, Detective?
I'm gonna find your daughters.
Caller reported an RV was parked at a rest stop off Route 46.
Show me your hands! Where'd you put those girls? Where are they?
What do you got?
We didn't find anything. This thing's clean.
And that boy has never been in trouble a day in his life.
They're letting him go. What? The police said they're letting him go today.
Why aren't you sending someone out to go arrest this guy?
Well, he has the IQ of a 10-year-old. There's no way he could abduct two girls and then make them disappear.
Maybe he wasn't on his own.
We're considering all possibilities.
I don't think you are considering all possibilities.
Just let me do my job.
Now, this was actually first watch for me. I thought I had, then I realized I hadn't. I thought I'd seen part of it. Watching it, I'd never seen this. When was the first time you had actually seen Prisoners?
Oh, goodness. So I didn't see it when it came out. I actually saw it about, I want to say like several months after it came out on video, it was a huge hit in the United States, and it was weird. I remember thinking it was weird at the time that a movie of this scale, that everyone who saw it and raved about it in my life told me was over 150 minutes. It was the star-studded adult thriller that can easily be compared to The Silence of the Lambs or a Seven.
Yes.
And at the time, I was very unfamiliar with Denis Villeneuve. So by the time I saw this movie, it was still some time before I saw, Sicario and Arrival, because those came out back to back. So I didn't know about the awesomeness that Villeneuve is as a filmmaker quite yet. And I remember, I loved Hugh Jackman growing up. I am, the original X-Men was one of the first VHS tapes my family had. So I have a lot of nostalgia attached to more so his portrayal of Wolverine than anything. And of course, I love Gyllenhaal. I think he's one of the best actors working today as well, as I'm sure we'll get into later in this recording. But I remember being a lifelong fan of noir and someone who's always had an affinity for these super dark crime thrillers. Prisoners was the darkest one I saw in a long time. When I finally watched it, I rented it one day and just like, it kind of fell over me. And I found myself crying in several parts. And it's a movie where I love dark thrillers. I love police procedurals. I love detective movies, probably more than many people my age or otherwise. But I had never seen one at the time that really just took me on this emotional roller coaster. And I think that's why it stuck with me as long as it has. And it's not a movie I throw on casually where I'm like, oh, let me watch Prisoners, like it's not something I just quote along with. But whenever I have watched it, and yesterday was no exception, I literally found myself tearing up at all these certain moments. I love Villeneuve's vision for what he has to say about humanity, particularly the relationship between masculinity and every other social construct in the nuclear family concept and otherwise. And I just think it's as challenging and as lengthy and as dark as it is at times. It is one of my favorites of the 2010s, and I think it's the very best noir of the 2010s, foreign or otherwise.
That is a hard thing to argue against. As I said off mic, there was a moment when I first clicked on it and was watching it on Netflix and saw this thing was 2.5 hours. I went, what does this movie have any business being 2.5 hours? What do you think? What does this think it is? Zodiac? And then I watched it and went, yeah, it does actually. This is actually a perfect movie for 2.5 hours of what it's trying to do and kind of the nightmare world it's trying to put you in. And I love what you said about the different kind of modes of masculinity compared to the construct of the nuclear family, because you have Jake Gyllenhaal, Hugh Jackman, Paul Dano, and Terrence Howard, who are all kind of these different versions of these different types of men. Hugh Jackman's the alpha. So Jake Gyllenhaal is the smart alpha. But then you have Terrence Howard, who's not. But then I love how it is kind of, you can tell Hugh Jackman is kind of the lower middle class family who is struggling, yet Terrence Howard and Viola Davis are obviously the educated, higher middle class, obviously have more money, better house, family, yet when it comes to the role of what they're going to, when you have the plot of, well, it's not a plot. I think Hugh Jackman just reacts and just takes Paul Dano off the street. And then brings Terrence Howard into it, but he is just not equipped for anything that is going on. Like my thing when I was sort of watching is like, okay, so why do you cast Viola Davis as the wife character? She's one of the best working actors at the moment. I didn't look up to see when Getting Away with Murder started, so I don't know if this was before, but she has such this amazing screen presence. I'm like, no, you want to torture Paul Dano in an abandoned house, you get Viola Davis. You do not get Terrence Howard for this job. Because she's so great. But I love kind of the way that Villeneuve will kind of show these different examples of how different people react to the exact same situation. and whether you want to be Gyllenhaal, but you know you'll end up being Hugh Jackman. It's a really sort of fascinating way how he constantly compares and contrasts these guys in it.
No, definitely. And I think to your point, that's one of the kind of the brilliant magic tricks about the way this movie's cast. And what Villeneuve is able to do with actors, particularly in this movie, in that he casts each actor often, for example, like Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal, they're usually cast as the alpha males. And what I think is so brilliant about Prisoners, one of the things is that in a typical detective movie, detective noir, you're following an investigator who is operating outside of the law. Here, the movie is digging into the very publicized hook of what would happen if, you know, your kids got kidnapped, and what would you do as a parent? And it taps into that fear. And the way Villeneuve does that in a way that avoids being like an airplane thriller, or some Gone Girl ripoff or something, as hunting down deer with his son. And he basically says to him, you know, we have to stay protected. We have to always be ready for what lies ahead, essentially. And that kind of gentle bravado, in a sense, that fatherly way of a man steering his son into knowing what it's like to feed the unit, is shaken up immediately. Not only when his daughter goes, but of course his daughter's friend is kidnapped as well, but also with Maria Bello's character. She undergoes quite the undervalued transformation in the movie. You can see it affecting Jackman in a way, which is something that Gyllenhaal doesn't really have, because Gyllenhaal is fatiguing and staying up late at night in order to find, because he's devoted to the case. He cares about Jackman. He cares about Terrence Howard. He cares about Viola Davis. And whenever he's interviewing Maria Bello later in the movie, he's the one who visibly pays attention to the painkillers, you know, that sit next to her bed. But it's those two diametrically opposing alphas, both narratively and performance-wise, because their essences as actors, like, it's Gyllenhaal having to take his quirkiness and having to play it back and be more subtle, and Jackman is all quirk. He's very much rageful, he's a rageful showman. Like, he's basically Wolverine, if Wolverine, you know, questioned if he loved people or not, because ultimately I would argue Wolverine loves people, but Jackman in this film, you do question that sometimes. You really do.
No, you do. He's a melody man on the edge. The fact that he's teaching his son to hunt, he's teaching him how to take care of himself. But as soon as everything falls apart, he doesn't want to be part of a society anymore. He's just like, no, screw the rules. And I love how, because most of this type of movie, it would be the cop going off book. Jake Gyllenhaal plays everything by the book. He's the good cop. He argues with his captain, who have different points of view on how to handle the case and how the publicity is going. But it's Hugh Jackman who just has had enough of humanity. Like, you could tell he's kind of the guy who's resentful because his life didn't end up the way he wanted it. And I really do love Maria Bello's performance in this, because she falls apart, which is completely understandable. Your daughter's just gone missing without a trace. You don't know what's happening. It's taking longer and longer to find her. And yeah, the fact that it's through Gyllenhaal's lens that you see the drugs or the pills, sleeping pills, they're just probably trying to keep her sedated as much as they can. And everyone forgets about that poor woman. And she's the one who's kind of left holding the bag almost. She's the one who's got to keep the family together because Jackman's found himself in a hole. She's kind of the one who's kind of, it's interesting how the movie plays with her. Well, 1 minute, the movie don't deal with her because it's too hard, but it's on purpose from Villeneuve's standpoint. But she's the one who's like, okay, I have to be strong now. My kid's back. I don't know where my husband is. I'll take the trade, I guess. This is the best it's gonna, if this is what I have to think, this is the trade I'm gonna have to take. Whereas Terrence Howard and Viola Davis's family came back together. So they can kind of go on as they were a little bit more than Hugh Jackman and Maria Bello's family, which, yeah, it's a fascinating contrast between those two.
Well, and I think to your earlier point where you were probably questioning, why would you cast Viola Davis as almost a thankless wife type?
Yeah.
And then what I think is so brilliant about the way it subverts that trope in contrast to how Jackman's family is dealt with is that Davis is actually like a true African-American family. In a lot of ways, she really holds the family down in ways that Terrence Howard doesn't.
Yeah.
And oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, because I rewatched the bathroom scene where she's brought to the house where they're keeping Dano, and then went, oh, that's why she's in this movie. She's the one who's, there's it's sort of a nice contrast between an African-American or family of color where you've got Viola Davis, who's absolutely keeping everything together. And then you have the white lower middle class family where it's the patriarchy, it's the father. And Hugh Jackman's not doing a good job at all. Viola Davis is, which I think is why that family is able to stay together than that. But when she's in the bathroom, having compassion for him, but knowing that she needs some information off him at the same time, like she's horrified. I'm like, oh, okay. This is the scene why you get someone like Viola Davis. You need her gravitas, her being able to convey multiple emotions at the same time, and getting it done really, really well. Okay, yeah, that was when I get to that bathroom scene. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's why she's in this movie. I understand now.
And that's such a remarkable scene. I'm so happy that you rewatched that scene twice, or a couple of times, because that's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. I mean, I love the way it's shot as well. Whenever Terrence Howard and Jackman are having to hold Paul Dano down, and he has the glass in his hand, and he eventually is just like, dude, let it go, let it go, let it go, and he looks back at Viola Davis and is just like, you look at what you've done, essentially. And we can't just let him roam free. Like, we need to do this. And it's interesting from that point forward, and even a little bit before that scene, how Jackman's character, Killer Dover is his name, how Dover gradually convinces himself more and more that what he's doing is for his daughter. And you don't lose sight of that. And I think the movie doesn't necessarily negate what he's doing is wrong, but at the same time, the movie is still empathetic towards him in a way, because each time where he's either telling Paul Dano, why are you making me do this? Why are you making me like torture you to death? Or, anytime Terrence Howard is basically asking him questions, Terrence Howard is the one who initially expresses that what they're doing is incorrect, and he eventually just explodes in tears, where he's just like, dude, I know you, this isn't like you. And then Jackman's like, you can let him go if you want, but this is what I have to do. And it is so chilling to me, just like watching Jackman be terrifying like this. In a lot of ways, it's the cycle of victimization against children and against men in a lot of ways that really does make Jackman like this. And although what he's doing is wrong, it's the Christian symbolism, the Catholic imagery that you see throughout Jackman's mode and also throughout the film itself, where you kind of feel a weird empathy for him. And again, with that bathroom scene, just going back to it, whenever Terrence Howard tears up, every time I watch this movie, I tear up, because it's so powerful to me to watch a man cry on screen, especially when the fears that both of these dads have about the ambiguity of where their daughters are so pungent in the air. You feel it, and you feel it through your core, because these performances, because the script, and because the direction by Villeneuve is so masterfully done.
It really is. When Jackman cries, it's purely out of always anger and desperation. Like, it's because he just doesn't, the emotions that he's having just can't sort of stay in. He's trying to keep his emotions Like he's even trying to deflect, like, why are you making me torture you? It's like, no, you're torturing him. You made that decision. I understand your reasoning behind it. But it's still you're constantly deflecting. But when Howard breaks down, it's just pure, oh my God. It's an amazing scene, and it's a performance.
And it's in front of his wife too.
Yeah.
Like, he's bringing down in front of his wife, which I mean, I know with me, like whenever, like, I mean, I'm getting personal, but whenever I've cried in front of women, it's been, including my own mother, it's just like, man, what am I doing? But like, sometimes you gotta let those emotions out. And I think this movie is kind towards that. It really is. Yeah.
Something Jackman probably never did in front of his wife. You can tell he's not spending nights at home. He's spending nights at the other house. Because he cannot show that in front of his wife. With Terrence Howard, he breaks down in front of his wife. It's an incredibly impersonal moment. And I didn't think Terrence Howard had that kind of performance in him. Like it's kind of amazing to watch when you think I think I know what this actor is. You see him in something like Prisoners, you're like, oh, okay, just when he gets a director like Villeneuve and everything like that, that's when you can really let a person kind of shine like that. He's amazing. And I love how it's such a really great performance. Everyone's great, and God, everyone's great in this movie. It is but it kind of descends into this kind of nightmare hole. I mean, literally from the get-go, as soon as those girls go, I mean, as soon as you see that RV, you're like, oh, don't be climbing up that thing. Like, just stay away. It's like the drain in It. You just do not go near it.
True that. I wanted to ask you too, along these lines, like, because this was your first time seeing it.
Yeah.
You know, I have a thing where, like, if I go on, you know, one of my friends' podcast or a podcast where I don't know the person for the first time, I want to be sure to not torture the person who's hosting, because like I always feel bad if they end up, you know, not connecting to a film or in some way, shape, or form. But so what I wanted to ask you was, you know, when I first put forth this double as an idea, were you excited to see Prisoners for the first time? What was your initial reaction now you've seen the movie a couple of times? And what do you think of Villeneuve as a whole?
I was excited to see Prisoners. It was a movie I'd been putting off. My first Villeneuve was Sicario. So that was a little bit after this movie had come out. And I love Sicario. And then, of course, Arrival comes along and I'm like, oh, yes, whatever this is. The sadness in oh my God, when I have never cried. The last movie I cried really hard at was Arrival. As soon as I realized what that movie was and what that whole beginning was, I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. I like Villeneuve. I think he can go into the epic mode a little bit too much. As much as I love Blade Runner 49, I think I love moments, not the whole. Like the Dave Bautista bit at the beginning. There are a few moments in there when they're in Las Vegas that I think is, well, Deakins won an Oscar for the cinematography, which he should have been when Oscars don't mean anything, but the man should have won 5 already.
Yeah. Including this movie.
Oh my God. I think I was just watching this. Why is this movie looking so good? Oh, wait, Deakins. Oh, that explains it. Damn, this movie should be, there's the contrast between the bleak ugliness and what Deakins is. I mean, there's a shot over the reservoir that, oh my God.
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
So amazing. It's just like, you're a wizard, Deakins, you're a wizard. And as much as I love those kind of things, I think he does slip into his epic mode a little bit, especially now he's doing Blade Runner 49, Dune, and all that kind of thing. I think there's a tendency to go, oh, I have got the clout to be David Lean. I don't have to do these small personal stories anymore, which I think, even though Prisoners is 2.5 hours long, I think it's an incredibly personal, small movie. I don't have to do the Sicario. I can move away from the Sicario. What's that amazing one he made is when he was still in Canada.
Incendies.
Incendies. He doesn't have to do that, which I love Incendies, even though that movie is dark as all hell.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they didn't even black. Like, you didn't even need that twist at the end, and I was just like, why why do this to me? Villeneuve, why? But he's not having to do, he can go and do the epic Dune and Blade Runner. And I love the fact that Dune did well. Like, I think Dune is a very weird story to begin with. And the fact that he made it accessible to people, I think is an achievement on its own. And again, won all the technical awards at the Oscars because it's a technical movie. Just because I have a thing against movies set in deserts is beside the point. And it's very 70s woo-woo. And I'm like, why are there bagpipes on a planet? I don't get this. That's my own... That's my own things about that movie. But no, I generally like him. And I think I just like, it sounds so contrite when you say it, but I prefer his earlier work. But I do, because he was able to have these really contained stories feel epic. I mean, Sicario is literally a revenge story for one person. And Emily Blunt is kind of pointless to that story, which I love. She's kind of gotten involved in this for other reasons other than what Benicio del Toro actually wants in this movie. It's about him, not Emily Blunt. But the fact that Emily Blunt is so good in that movie, and the fact that you can Sicario is tracing this whole big thing about the drug war, how it's not working, the factions within the cartels, all these kind of things, and it boils down to something Del Toro wants to do, I think is freaking genius. Same with Arrival, this big massive movie, but it's really about a story of a woman and her daughter. And Prisoners is about the same way. It is about a man losing control of a thing that he thought he had complete control over, his family. But not the sense that he's abusive, but in the sense that I am the father, I am the patriarchy, this is my corner of the world. And to have your daughter taken, what do you do? And he has, like Liam Neeson, a very particular set of skills, and that is terrible renovation for a torture house. But yeah, and the fact that he took God away, it's like Incendiaries, he took God away from the movie. I mean, I think Prisoners makes a bigger point in that, to say, at the whole spoilers for Prisoners coming up, the whole thing is because Melissa Leo lost her son, so she decided to wage a war against God, taking away people's children for that
turning
purpose.
them into the devil.
Turning them into the devil, which she completely achieves with Jackman. But she loses when it comes to Gyllenhaal, which I think is another reason why their dichotomy is brilliant, because there's a great scene where if you miss key details in that dialogue, you don't exactly know what's going on. Because I missed it the first time I saw it, but it's when Jake Gyllenhaal is telling someone, Detective Loki, where Loki is telling someone about his past in a boys' home growing up, which is alluding to a tragic past of abuse and that kind of thing. And you look at him in contrast to Paul Dano, and how Paul Dano is being tortured by Killer Dover when Paul Dano is ultimately emotionally stunted by the abuse that he's had since he was taken, as his innocence basically ended when he was 10 years old. Yeah.
And so he's this...
It has no impact on him, which is the scariest thing. It's like what he is being done to Dano does not emotionally impact him in any way, shape, or form. That is terrifying. Yeah.
And so it begs the question, the more you learn about the mystery, as to what the hell did Melissa Leo, and her husband do, and that kind of thing, to this poor kid who's now a man, but in his brain he's not that.
Yeah.
Which is so terrifying. But then Gyllenhaal ends up beating that because he's the one who ends up solving the case, essentially. Like, yes, Jackman finds Leo, but because it's a movie and he has to, like the old, post Hays Code noirs, he does deserve to go to jail if he's caught for everything that he's done, because it is morally correct. I know that, people, I'm not a sadist, but it's Gyllenhaal who ends up coming out on top because he's able to beat that cycle of victimization. And much like Fincher 7, I think the way the movie ends in regards to the second build character's arc points to a tinge of positivity that makes this movie rewatchable for me. I totally get if Prisoners is, if people listening, if this is not their type of movie, if it's something that they're just like, Preston, like, keep that movie the fuck away from me. That movie made me feel like shit the first time. Or if you have children of your own or your own triggering past, if this movie's not for you, I totally get that. But for me, this is a genre movie for adults that I appreciate existing, especially since it came out post Avengers and before we hit the blockbuster saturation wall that we're kind of at now. I appreciate Prisoners for existing, and I love what it has to say about, again, masculinity and that kind of thing. And I like the emotionally complex views that it brings to light in a mainstream thriller. And much like yourself, Lindsay, I actually really like Villeneuve as well. I would say I think I'm weird in that I think I love every other Villeneuve movie. Because I love Prisoners, I love Arrival. I do love Blade Runner 2049, so I guess that's the exception to my rule. Whereas the movies of his that I don't love, I do really like.
Yeah.
But I do think that for me, it's not the epicness of him, but it's the cold sterileness of it.
Yes.
That I think serves a really personal story like Prisoners, and I think suits a Blade Runner sequel in 2017. And I think what he gets out of Gosling and basically utilizing his shtick of being taciturn, very stoic, very silent, and having him actually play a replicant, hunt together replicants, I think unlocks a new dimension, no pun intended, for that film and Gosling as an actor in particular. But there's some Villeneuve movies, like with Dune, I really liked it. And I think I said this on the Lawrence Arabia episode of Cobwebs that I was on, where I really liked Dune, but there's only so many hours I can watch Timothée Chalamet just be
steer into the desert.
Yeah, and Peter O'Toole naturally has a charisma that makes me like him, and I know Dune is a different type of story, and I do applaud the movie for existing in the way that it is, especially considering how weird and how dense that book is. I think the fact that it's a cohesive movie is a miracle. So even when I don't love Villeneuve or connect to him emotionally, I never dislike him, is what I'm trying to say. But I definitely think, for me, as much as I love Arrival, I definitely think Prisoners might be my favorite of his movies.
That's fascinating. I think for Dune, I was never going to be completely connected to it because I never could connect to the book. And that book is a weird 70s woo-woo story of creating your religions and all that kind of thing. And I get why people love it. It's just something I could never approach. Even though I realized without Dune, you never get Star Wars, the book. Like, you could tell George Lucas read that book and went, aha, I have an idea. And I also like Kurosawa. Let's go.
And just going to throw the searches in there casually.
I'm just going to make a movie I want to make. And then he's probably as surprised as anyone when that movie hit as much as it did. But so that was that. But I think Villeneuve was the only person who could have made Blade Runner 2049. Maybe not the only person, but I think in what he needed, that coldness and the color and the way of having, because he does have it beating heart. I don't think his movies aren't completely cold. He is very good at that emotional manipulation.
Agreed.
Under the sheen of this coolness. And he does that in Prisoner so well. I really, really like Prisoner. I almost love it. Because I think there are things I didn't quite notice in the first watch. Though I was kind of looking at it going, especially when you sort of mentioned the abuse of boys, I think it shows the difference between, I don't think it goes into Hugh Jackman's childhood at all, but I got the feeling that he had a very abusive father, not in the sense what Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Detective Loki, went through, but in the sense of his father got the belt, which was much more accepted back in the day. He's doing his best not to be his father, but because he does what he does, he leans way too far in the other direction for what he does to Paul Dano. And
Which I think is why Terrence Howard makes for such a great foil.
Yes.
Because you can see through...
He's never been beaten in a day in his life, which I am saying is a good thing. Like, you do not beat kids. If you ever want to see a really great movie in that, watch The Black Phone, because that is all about beating your children and the kind of weird masculinity thing of men having to prove themselves through violence. It's fascinating. It is. And I think it is much about... And Scott Derrickson said this is a very personal movie, because he grew up in that kind of household as well. It came that, because I'm talking about a certain kind of abuse where you just beat your shit out of your kids, because that is what you did. You got the belt, you got the wooden spoon, you had a personal implement kind of thing. This is not that far removed from how we raise children today. And I think it's never really spoken about, but you really get that kind of sense of how you treat your children and how you want to treat them now. And then Melissa Leo coming in and going, well, if no one can have if I can't have my child, then no one can have theirs. I'm going to destroy them all. Takes that kind of mentality and just takes it into a whole new stratosphere kind of thing.
Well, Hugh Jackman, that scene where he throws Dylan Minnette against the wall.
Oh, yes.
After Dylan basically tells him, like, dude, like, you've left me and mom here by ourselves. Like, you're not taking care of her. I'm pretty much am. And it's very much the moment that I feel every son comes to at a certain age where they lash out against their father and they start to exhibit paternal qualities.
Yes.
But not always in the healthiest of circumstances. It's always that moment is very much what happens when young boys exhibit male proclivities.
Yes.
And it's going against their father. It's a moment where it's like, oh, like you're emasculated in my eyes and you're supposed to be my dad.
Yes.
And it's a different it's a level of hurt that few movies really get at. Like I always call it the Disney dad thing, where a lot of Disney movies of a certain era will be about broken families. And it's like, no, your dad was off working. Like, okay, how is he an asshole? Whereas Hugh Jackman is actually kind of an asshole. So when that scene happens, yeah.
He would not be an easy dad to have. Even at the best of times, I think he would have been a hard ass. Like, you can tell he's trying to make his son into the man he thinks he should be. And as soon as Dylan Minnette pushes back and is that, he gets thrown against a wall. So it's like, no, you be that man to other people. You don't be that man to me. Which I think shows how, especially in a very lower class. Okay, fine. So in a very white. This is not just white, because I know there are other cultures. In a very lower class white culture.
Wait, there is? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I only found, you know what? I only found this out 5 years ago. Other cultures. It's blew my mind. No, I mean,
I thought America was only white. Damn it.
I know. God, it's like the friggin' scene in Dominion when what's the bad guy looks at the first friggin' assistant and looks at him like, it's like, oh my God, you're a black man? I didn't notice before. I was like, that's the choice that you decide to go. Okay. The Dominion's another story.
Oh goodness. This is
where there's a moment where he looks at him realizing that he's a man of color, and I'm just like going, that's the take you decided to. Okay.
No, I was gonna think there's that scene. Have you ever seen Blast from the Past with Brendan Fraser?
Yes, I have.
There's so I watched that movie for the first time like the first year of COVID, and so it was perfect. It was perfect for that. And the whole first 30 minutes, I was thinking to myself, because the movie, if people don't know, is about a kid who eventually grows up to be played by Brendan Fraser, who it's originally set in the 50s. They're in a bomb shelter.
Yep.
And basically Brendan Fraser's character is raised from 1950s pop culture and music.
Yes.
And so when he gets out of the bomb shelter for the first time ever as an adult.
Only Brendan Fraser at his most charming could pull this off, by the way.
True. Because it was a miracle I still liked him after this moment. But I was thinking, I was like, how is he gonna react to black people? And then this cute little adorable little boy shows up, and then the first thing Brendan Fraser says is, "Ooh, a Negro," and the kid just runs off.
I should have had something thrown at him, but as I said, only Brendan Fraser can get away with that and is being his most charming, because otherwise it would just be like oh no. It's, yeah.
Sorry to derail the combo.
But when you kind of wondering what happened to Paul Dano, and also the other guy who is becoming Villeneuve's guy, which I kind of love.
You mean the guy from the Suicide Squad?
Yes, David Machlin, I think I can't pronounce the surname. Him as well. You're like, oh my God, what did they do to these people to be the men that they've grown up into? I mean, that scene when Paul Dano lifts the dog, it took me a second to realize what he was doing. And then I was like, how did they just hang a dog right then? Because I had to kind of go back and go, right, how did they do that shot? It's dark, so you can't probably see the contraption holding up the dog, but it's horrifying.
It's eerie how real that looks.
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament, honestly, to the magic that Deakins has, which is why I think he's our greatest living cinematographer right now, is because there's so many shots where Villeneuve is communicating to our eyes what's happening, but there's little to no dialogue. And if there is, it's so diegetic to where there's very little sound. I mean,
yeah.
In any other police procedural, during the first act, which I do believe this is a 5-act movie, because it fits into the 2.5 hour Shakespearean way of telling a blockbuster story in this manner.
It really does.
In the first 20 or 30 minutes, usually you get a very protracted, very long scene of Jake Gyllenhaal, being interviewing a bunch of people who knew the Dover family as well as the Birch family. And instead, you get a lot of these, you get a kind of a short montage of all these these small shots after the inciting incident with Detective Loki that pulls him into the mystery, where you see through raindrops on a window, Gyllenhaal talking to someone at a store. You see other scenes of cars and bushes being parked in front of these buildings, where you can assume that Gyllenhaal, because you feel his presence in the movie, that he's doing some interrogation and questioning. And that shot that you referred to, where it's Paul Dano singing a Batman-inspired jingle, wink, wink. He's basically, I think it's the way it's framed, because it's framed beautifully, but it's the center focus that they do so often in movies of this type, where you're just zeroing in on Paul Dano being a fucking weirdo.
Yeah.
And you can't help but feel Jackman's emotions, where it's just like, dude, what the hell is wrong with you? And then, of course, that gradually increases the more you get to know Dano's character through such perverse means.
Yeah, because at the heart of it, Hugh Jackman is a bully, or that type of guy who would pick on someone he sees as weaker. So when he's looking at Paul Dano just being a freaking weird, and Paul Dano is a chinless weirdo in this movie. Yes, wink, wink. He does this again at a movie that came out this year. I was just looking there going, oh, he's the Riddler. This is what he is. Okay, I get it now. But Hugh Jackman just wants to punch him in the face just because he's weird, as well as the fact that he has vital information that he about his kid. So there's this kind of weird dichotomy that you can kind of tell that Hugh Jackman just wants to beat the shit out of him just because, but it gets way more vicious because, now he has something of mine he has my daughter. He has my child. And I need to get her back. I need to protect my family. I need to sort of restore my life again. Because the darkest scene, apart from the dog, the darkest scene is when he's in that shower contraption, which is horrifying. I mean, the fact that he's burning this human being in there.
Jackman literally says to the Birches, like, okay, if it's too cold, he'll freeze. If it's too warm, he'll die.
Yeah.
And when the first time I saw that movie, I was like, what the fuck is he on? It's just like, oh man.
It's just like the torture just ramps up. I mean, first of all, it's taking him to a place, then it's just beating the shit out of him. Then it's putting him in this contraption. And he's all alive through this. I mean, Dano survives the movie. I'm correct in that. He's in a hospital bed by the end of it, isn't he?
No, he's
he lives through
his face
this.
is just swollen. Yeah.
His face is just swollen, and then but when he's looking through that tube and you just see his eye, and you just see it, his pupils expand like he's passed out. I actually thought that moment, oh, this is the moment he's killed him, but his pupil just expands. It is pure nightmare fuel. I mean, this movie really loves to dig into the nightmare fuel of the situation. This is a waking nightmare. There is no God. There is no one to pray to. Because I love this first scene when Gyllenhaal is talking to the priest and he falls into that whole basement that he has, which is kind of like going, the well metaphor, I understand. And then, but you see the shrine to the Virgin Mary. Okay, so he's put religion in there, but when Jackman falls into Leo's hole, there is no thing to pray to. And I love how quiet it goes. Like and then you realize those girls were in that hole. Oh my God.
With tape over their mouths.
Over their mouths. It's just darkness and silence. It's horrifying.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of psychological stuff going on in this movie.
Yeah.
I think if people haven't seen this, that would really surprise them because, again, it's this 2.5 hour, R-rated, very adult thriller. But when I keep saying adult, I mean in terms of thematics and not just the violence, because as you allude to, there is so much, honestly, gorgeous Christian Catholic imagery going on in this movie. I mean, the way that Deakins frames the visual and shoots whenever Anna and Joy are absent, it's so many people crying and kind of like coming together for what they believe is their memory. And then it's interrupted by Gyllenhaal chasing who ends up being the polka dot man.
Yes.
In the Suicide Squad.
And also some weird dude in Dune. I don't remember who he played, but he was definitely in Dune and he looked weird.
No, Villeneuve loves that guy.
He does. I enjoy him a lot. I'm actually kind of happy every time he pops up. But yeah, I love the fact that I love the fact that he's turning into Villeneuve's guy.
No, he definitely, because Villeneuve is kind of weird anyways, and that guy definitely looks interesting.
Yes.
But I think that helps the roles that he's cast in for sure. And Villeneuve in general, much like David Lean, who we keep talking about. Like I actually, again, I said this before, but I think Villeneuve's superpower is David Lean's superpower in that he's able to have you linger on a shot. And even if you are not super interested in said shot because it's so lengthy, you're always at least thinking about the emotion underpinning the shot. Because I would argue that Villeneuve's focus is never to be pretentious. Like I've never watched a Villeneuve movie, even the ones I don't love. I always come away enjoying them because it's like I see what he was doing. And with this movie, I feel like it's the first time he has Hollywood money. I mean, I know he did Enemy before this, but Enemy is not what I would call a Hollywood movie. Definitely not in terms of the decisions that it makes. But with Prisoners, he's making Hollywood. He's having Hollywood money. He his leads. It's a Hugh Jackman movie who at this point was still selling tickets, putting asses in seats. Gyllenhaal's never really done that, in my opinion. Gyllenhaal is an amazing actor. But if you look at the box office reception for Ambulance, for example, which I think is incredibly disappointing.
It's a crime. It should have made more money.
It should have made more money. I kept telling more people to go see it, but it was like Michael Bay. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. I can't argue with that.
I had to go. Look, this is laid back Michael Bay. He likes people in this movie. Okay, yes, there are jokes, and some of it's dumb, but he generally likes the people in this movie. This is not going to be I'm turning this person to a joke. It's turning, there's a little bit of that. There's still stereotypes, but he's like, I can tell there's a bit of humanity in Ambulance.
Well, and there's a scene in that movie that I actually found myself impressed by where it's a person of LGBTQ identification who's venting to a therapist about their relationship with another human being. And I thought that was a really beautiful, it was played as a joke, but not because
he was
it was
gay.
with a queer person. It was played as a joke because it was a relatable relationship construct that we can all relate to, even as allies and anything of the sort. So I thought that was very brilliant that Bay pulled that off. I thought that was very mature.
Oh no, he does that a couple of times with that scene. It's the typical Bay joke of my partner's being a pain, but this time he's in a queer couple with another man and not the annoying wife character, which is it just changes. It's like, oh, okay, so that's cool. Or the tech woman who I love, and usually that would be some sort of racist joke, and all they talk about is Cheetos. And I'm like, thank you. That's all I want. You can have the dumb jokes about the Cheetos, but you do not need to make fun of her. She's awesome. Thank you, Bae. It's kind of great in sort of that respect. And yeah, I think he likes people, and I think this movie loves its characters as well. Even Melissa Leo, I think this movie has a lot of sympathy for her, even though she is the worst. Her and her husband are the worst people in the world, yet this movie still has sympathy for what they've gone through as well. It's just the cycle of devastation, even though they are perpetuating it a lot. And it's kind of incredible what he managed to pull off. But all right, go back to the Lean point. I think Lean's secret superpower, as well as his long shots, is his landscape. Lawrence of Arabia is the most obvious example of that, because you have these amazing desert vistas, and the famous shot where he's got the match and then it just splits to the sun over the desert. But if you watch Dr. Zhivago, the way he kind of shows, well, it's not Russia, it's Spain. I think it's Spain pretending to be Russia, but these kind of there's no way he's filming Zhivago in USSR. But these amazing kind of lingering landscapes, or these snowy kind of spacious areas, or even if you go to holiday with Katharine Hepburn in Venice, I think it's Venice.
Summertime.
Summertime, sorry, I'm thinking of the other Katharine Hepburn in Italy, Falling in Love movie. Summertime, you get these amazing kind of shots of Italy, and he does that so much. Like, he can just show you these lingering shots of these landscapes. And so I got the feeling that Denis went to his cinematographer, Deakins, sorry, my mind's blanking. We talked about it for an hour.
Well, because Summertime is shot by Jack Hildyard, who shot Bridge on River Kwai. So
yes.
It has that.
That was the other one. The thing of the prison, and I think it was shot in Thailand. Those amazing kind of, oh my God, yeah. His landscapes are amazing, and Villeneuve and Deakins do that as well. I mean, as I've mentioned, the shot of the reservoir, when you see all the cops like pacing over the field to try and see if they can find clues to where the girls have gone. It's oh my God. Yeah, he does that same thing, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. I think, which I'm glad you mentioned Summertime. That's actually probably my second favorite Lean film, as a matter of fact. I adore that movie.
It's an amazing movie, yeah.
It's so good. But yeah, I was actually, I brought up Ambulance a little bit in relation to how Gyllenhaal typically doesn't sell movies unless it's with Hugh Jackman or with Spider-Man. So I was curious with you, how do you feel about Jackman? Oh, excuse me. We talked a lot about Jackman's performance, but I wanted to ask you kind of what your individual thoughts were with Gyllenhaal in this movie, and how it contrasts with other Gyllenhaals in some of the other movies that we've talked about.
I love how Gyllenhaal can and will give you a different performance in each movie he's in, which is maybe why he doesn't sell tickets, because you never know what Gyllenhaal you're going to get, which is why I think he's one of the best actors working today. Because I think that's why I wanted to see Ambulance, because I'm like, Jake Gyllenhaal in a Michael Bay movie? What does that look like? Awesome, by the way.
It's 90s Nick Cage energy.
It really is. He went full 90s Nick Cage energy, and the only reason why I kind of like The Gray Man is because Chris Evans is doing 90s Nick Cage energy and with his character.
I've been thinking about like biting the bullet and watching that. Like I really have, because I'm curious. I'm curious about The Gray Man. I really am.
I don't think it's as bad as people say. I don't think it's the best movie. Watching Gosling and Chris Evans and Jessica Hardwick, who is admittedly in a terrible wig. Please give Jessica Hardwick a better wig, please, people. Stop making it look like she's 40. Just stop it. I think it's fine. Because they have to spend so much money on the actors, they can't spend the money on the action, which kind of sucks. So there's a few good moments here and there that I generally like. But for a movie that wants to be so action focused, Netflix put the money in the wrong places, I think. You make it smaller, less known actors, but yeah, that's my point of view on it. Though Chris Evans shouting, "I was shot in the ass" is one of my favorite line readings of the year. Yeah, he's wonderful. He's the reason why to watch it. Him and Gosling are actually pretty great reasons to watch it.
I was going to say, Chris Evans going full Scott Pilgrim in an action movie. I mean, that's enough to make me watch it. So,
yeah, it's worth it for that.
Perfect.
No, but I love Gyllenhaal. I think he does something different. Even in Spider-Man Far From Home, you get a performance you don't usually see from him. From like Danny Darko to his more sort of emo Nightcrawler is Bareback. Oh God,
Brokeback Mountain.
Bareback. That's inappropriate. I'm sorry, I might cut that out. Brokeback Mountain. Jesus Christ, I'm just putting in my foot today. Yeah, you never get the same performance twice, and I think that's why. Which I love him. But I think that's why a lot of people go, well, I don't know what I'm going to get from him. Whereas from Hugh Jackman, you kind of know. I think this is a slightly different performance from Jackman. And I think, because I just had watched The Prestige a little bit before I watched this, and at Prestige, he's not quite there yet for the performance he needs, which I think is purely on purpose. Like, I think they wanted someone who's the great showman, but who wasn't quite as good an actor as Christian Bale, who's like nailing it, and you're seeing this frustration of Jackman going, I want to be as good as friggin' Bale. Let me be as good as Bale. And this one,
you see that in their performances in that movie.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about Jackman. I think it's taken him. I think he's always been great. I think he's always. I mean, I think it's interesting when you go back and watch those early X-Men movies, for example, you can tell that he's doing a great job as Wolverine. I think he's particularly great in the second film. But you can definitely tell that, much like a lot of comic book movies of that era, like he's cast because he's good looking.
Yes.
Because he doesn't look a lot like the Wolverine of the comics. Whereas you look by the time you get to Logan, it's like, oh shit, I can't imagine anyone else being this jacked, being this world weary. Like you look so grizzled, you have gray in your hair. This is the Logan of the comics. Like this is fucking awesome. And I think you can track Jackman's trajectories and his career growth through the different X-Men movies that he's in over the years. It's very interesting.
Absolutely can. 2000 Hugh Jackman could have never pulled off Logan. And I like seeing actors going through that journey of seeing them, okay, you're a good actor, but you maybe not as when he's in The Prestige, clearly you're not the technical actor Christian Bale is, but Christian Bale's been acting since like he was 5. So yeah, he's had a lot more time to sort of hone it. But then you get to something like 2013 when he's in Prisoners and he's a lot more in the pocket. And then I've heard amazing things about his performance in Bad Education, that movie you were talking about, because he's a lot, and in Logan, he's utterly fantastic. So he's always been a performer, but I think to be an actor to convey difficult roles, he's had to work at, and you can tell he's been working at it, because he keeps, every 10 years, he'll do one of these roles where it's like, oh, I did not see Hugh Jackman would be in a Prisoners type movie, yet he really kills it. He's really, and you can see, he's an actor where you can see the work going in behind it. Jake Gyllenhaal, you don't, because he's for the sounds of it, he's a weirdo in real life. So it's kind of like him and Joaquin Phoenix, where they just go on, they become someone else, they know the technique behind it, they're very, very thin, but you don't see the work. It feels a lot more effortless. Christian Bale.
Those are both actors. Sorry. I was just going to say Joaquin and Gyllenhaal, those are both actors where they were acting ever since they were kids.
They were, much. I forget that Gyllenhaal was also a child actor.
I mean, I was raised on the MTV, like kind of the last decade of the MTV generation. So like Bubble Boy was played a lot in my house. I'm not saying it's good, but it was played a lot. And that's the last I'll talk about Bubble Boy tonight. But no, so acting is in their blood. Jackman's had to work at it. But I love how you can almost, Jackman is visibly working to where in this movie it looks like he's playing to his strengths in a performance that demands so much out of him emotionally and physically, whereas Gyllenhaal, it's a very physical performance that is no less emotional, but again is very, very subtle. And I feel like that's another reason why I connect with this movie so much, is that I've really come to love movies with movie stars. Where the movie star either has to be very, very subtle, or if they're not subtle, they're at least very, very charismatic. And I think if certain filmmakers who are able to weaponize that, like a Villeneuve, like various directors who've, I mean, honestly worked with Joaquin Phoenix and Christian Bale, for example, I think they get some of the best work out of those men. I think Prisoners is very indicative of that. I mean, going back to Terrence Howard, I mean, I personally love Howard. I think he's amazing in Hustle and Flow, but the work in that movie that he's doing, he played that role at a different age. Whereas what he has to do in Prisoners, he's not the hip hop bravado guy who was raised rough and then is doing rags to riches. Like, he's very much a family man who is struggling to hold his composure. And a lot of that falls on Viola Davis to kind of keep breaking their family up, to the point to where the scene where her daughter, who basically erupts out of the door and is like, fuck you, I was here all night, basically regretful of her parents doing what Jackman's doing to his kids.
Yes. And
you see in that scene how she's not used to that, I mean, she's feeling other things as well because her sister's, fucking kidnapped. But there's so much depth going on in this movie. And I mean, I hate to sound, pious when I say that. There's so much depth going on in this film. But no, there's... Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And also shout out to the late great Johan Johansson. His score is so perfectly ambient, and I hate that he passed away so young. I believe he scored Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, and I believe his last score was Mandy.
Yes, I was going to say he did Mandy, and it was a tragedy because I would have loved to see what he had done for 2049, because I think he started it, but then Hans Zimmer had to come in and finish it.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to see what he would have done, something like Dune. Like, I would have absolutely loved it, because I think he was more about setting the ambient mood for the movie, whereas Hans Zimmer is more about creating the ambient mood. And there are a lot of Hans Zimmer ones I like. I'm not completely dissing on Hans Zimmer, but he's about really creating that. I mean, I'm forever going to love the violin thing with Batman flying and Dark Knight and Begins, but it's, and his Pirates is chef's kiss, but he's about creating ambient, whereas Johan was more about, okay, so what is this movie? How do I sync up the ambient? And I think it works brilliantly for Prisoners. Sometimes you don't even notice it, and then sometimes it'll just like screech out and you're just like, oh my God. So yeah, it's absolutely, it's so good.
Oh no, it's excellent. Like, just on a technical level, I wish more thrillers that we get out of the States, and I wish they would reflect more of what South Korea is doing and what other nations are doing in contrast to what America puts out. I think because a year after Prisoners, you get Gone Girl, which I really love, but it feels like to me we have a bunch of Gone Girls now and not enough Prisoners, which go outside of the norm. It's like, okay, Gone Girl was a big success. Ben Affleck's a big name, and to be honest, I think Ben Affleck sells more tickets than even Hugh Jackman, just by individualism. But and Affleck stays in the tabloids a lot more than Jackman does.
Yes,
but,
he does. For the last 30 years. Ben Affleck, well, we're not going to get into his love life, but yeah, it's interesting.
Very interesting. And it feels like American thrillers a lot of the time. It's just like, okay, so like what airplane book can we turn into a 2-hour movie? And I mean, now it's like, okay, like usually these movies are going to go straight to Hulu, if that, or Prime or something, not even Netflix. But that's no diss to Hulu or Prime, by the way. I think because I think Fresh is a wonderful Hulu original that this year gave us. And shout out to you for recommending that to me.
Oh yeah, one of my favorite. One of my favorite movies of the year so far. Fresh is delightful, and I say that knowing fully what that movie's about.
Having seen it, I can confirm, despite itself.
Yes.
Well, but that's the thing about Prisoners is that I think it came out nine years ago, so it's going on almost a decade. And I think the fact that we're able to have these conversations, I think it's a miracle that the movie is able to deal with such weighty topics and take such big swings, like being as long as it is, having grown men cry on screen, approaching the subjects of abuse and assault and mental degradation and the decline of childhood in such not so subtle, but also subtle ways. It's a mix of those two styles to where you get a bit of the Kim Ji-woon brutality, but you also get the Bong Joon-ho message and the psychological underpinnings that you would see in a Parasite. So I think this movie is just great from all angles. And Lindsay, I am so happy that you really enjoyed it. I was kind of holding my breath that you would. I was like, oh, okay, I hope she takes this, because I know, when it comes to a serious, a very self-serious 2.5-hour genre piece, like these can go either way with people. So, but I'm glad you like this one.
No, I did. I just want a correction. Hugh Jackman is married to Deborah Lee Furness, not Deborah Foreman. That's a very different actor. But I think I got the D and the F mixed up. So yes, I just wanted to correct that. I always do that. I'm like, well, that's not right. But no, I did really enjoy this movie. I do love a procedural. I always have done. I do love the dark ones. And I think this is a movie that is very much worth its 2.5 hours. As you said, it's very Shakespeare kind of structured, as in the 5 acts. And I think that makes it work, as in these people who were behind the script, the rewrites, the cinematographer, the editing, Villeneuve's direction, everything. The actors knew what they were making, and they felt, and they were able to take these weighty things without being overly explicit about it. I mean, yes, this movie is very much about child abuse and its effects, but you only see the effects. You don't necessarily the actual child abuse, except even when the girls are missing, you have no idea. You get a little flashback from, I think, Joy, when she's talking about remembering only bits and pieces of it. But you never actually see what, you only get a suggestion from Gyllenhaal when he went through. You only see how, Hugh Jackman was probably beaten because how he treats the situation he's in. You only know what happened to Dano because he's a husk of a human being. Like, he's mentally stunted. He doesn't have any emotion. He just, that's kind of the smart way of dealing with it. It's not graphically showing you, but it's graphically showing you what the effects are and how this just breaks a society. It breaks families. It breaks every aspect of, it destroys people. Because none of these people are getting over anything. And my last question before we end it is, what do you think about the final moment, that whistle? Would you prefer it not being there, or do we like, oh, thank Christ, he heard it? Loki heard the whistles go, wait, what's that? He might not do anything about it, but there's a hint of like, oh, he knows something's up.
The latter. And I'm glad we talked that we're addressing the ending, because I can't believe we went this long without talking about it. But no, I personally love the way this movie ends for 2 reasons. The first being the whole whistle. It calls back to the beginning of the movie when you hear when a sound, it literally ignites the beginning of the film after the prisoner's title card. Which of course is when you first hear Keller Dover tell his son about what it means to kill a deer to protect the family, so to speak. And so the ending, when Keller does that, it's both him paradoxically calling out for help while also genuflecting back to the beginning of how his story started, where he begins as this towering, visibly traditional husk of masculinity.
Yes.
And he's literally broken down over the course of the movie time and time again to where we don't know if Gyllenhaal finds him or not. But we do know that if Gyllenhaal does find him, then he's going to face quite some time in prison for what he's done, for becoming that devil that Melissa Leo posited him to be. And the other reason I love that ending is I love the fact that the movie alludes to what is going to happen to Jackman before we even see it.
Yeah.
And I love how we see Gyllenhaal win out at the end, because I feel like as much as this movie is the story of two fathers dealing with their daughter's absences, it's still very much the story of Detective Loki, who I think over the course of this movie, as he's losing sleep, becoming more fatigued, this and that, we see him exhibit a care for this situation on such a level that I think part of the reason why he plays it by the book is because he doesn't want to fuck it up. He doesn't want to be Philip Marlowe. He wants to do it within rules and do it the right way, but he is getting so frustrated because he doesn't want his loss to perpetuate the cycle of violence that continues crimes like these then and now. And so I think there's that ending and that last shot. They do so much to cap this movie off and help make it the classic that I think it is today.
I think without that sting at the end of Jake Gyllenhaal turning his head to listen to the whistle, I think it would, because I have heard criticisms of the movie, it's bleak for bleak's sake. I think without that, it would be that. I could agree with that. But I think the fact that Loki is so good at his job, and you can see him getting frustrated because when you follow the rules, things take time. And you're dealing with a situation where time is not on your side, because the longer that these girls are missing, the more likelihood that you're never going to find them. Alive or dead, they're gone. And so he's realizing this. So there's these two he's got this kind of butting heads of, I need to do this quickly, but I need to do this right because one, people are watching me do this. Two, missing little girls are the first thing that's going to be on the news more than anything else. You also have his own moral compass because he's the character with, I think, the moral compass. Like he has a very distinguished, this is right, this is wrong. You can argue within that gray matter, which I love the scenes with his chief, who does not like to get up, which I loved. It's just like, he's a good cop, but he's like, I'm old, I'm not standing up. And but within that, he's got that. So when he has that kind of whistle, it's like, oh, okay, he's smart enough to know to keep investigating that, because we've seen him do that through the whole entire movie. He will take his time, even though he knows he doesn't have it. And
right.
I love that.
I'm glad you really took to this movie. It is an amazing movie, and I'm so glad I took the time to finally watch it. Thank you so much for suggesting it. Sure. I did have to ask, like, what is your favorite Villeneuve movie?
It's probably Sicario. Like,
nice.
Yeah, it's the first one I probably watched, and probably so it's probably that. Arrival's a very close second. They might be tied on a different day, but no, I do love Sicario a lot. Emily Blunt rules in that movie so much.
Dude, Emily Blunt is just like it felt like during that time too, she was going to be in a whole series of like super serious, awesome like action movies, like Edge of Tomorrow and Looper and of course Sicario and stuff like that. So, and of course I love what Emily Blunt's doing now. I think she's awesome in the Quiet Place series, even though I liked the first one way more than the second.
Yeah.
But no, that's a solid choice.
And you've said Prisoners is your favorite, so.
It is, and I think probably my close second on a given day it probably would be Blade Runner 2049, and I think part of that is because the first Blade Runner meant such a big deal to me when I first saw it as a teenager. I mean, I would still argue that it's for me the preeminent science fiction movie in a lot of ways, and when I saw Arrival and loved it, I was like, okay, Villeneuve is the perfect person to do so. And my big hope for him is that he keeps continuing to make his weird shit in Hollywood and utilize some of the best actors working today as his cast. I just hope that he doesn't kind of go the route that I feel like Nolan is guilty of at times, where Nolan, I feel like, is the most guilty of beginning his career doing these like story-driven, character-driven stories, and now he makes movies that you have to read a phone book to understand half the time. So
yes, I'm a little worried that Villeneuve is going down that road. So I'll have to see what he does after Dune, because I think you do need a telephone book to understand, to really grapple with what Dune, the book, is doing. And there are about 12 of them. 12 in that series. Oh God, someone took over. I got confused. But yeah, I'm a little worried that he's going to go down in that route, because I like when Nolan was dealing with specific characters, and I also like really intimate kind of stories. Like The Prestige, it's a big movie, but it's just really about these two guys butting heads and just wanting revenge on each other no matter what. I kind of hope Villeneuve doesn't go down that same road. I want him to kind of keep making these big movies, but with personal stories. So we'll see we'll see what happens after he's finished with Dune.
Yeah. I'm a little scared of the pushback that the Schlockana DMs might be hit with after this episode. I just called out Bong and Nolan, and I'm just full of the hot takes today.
Mark Warner will be right up your DMs. No, Mark won't. Mark is a lovely.
I do respect these guys. I just want to put that out there. But there's just, again, it's just that clinicalness. But I think with Prisoners, you get the best of both worlds. You get the technical proficiency that you would get in a widespread, epic length treatise on the human condition, while also getting, honestly, the human condition that I think is missing in even smaller stories of a more synopsized scale. And there's a lot to pull from here, which is why I wanted to pair it with this next movie we're going to be talking about, because not only are they both procedurals, but I feel like there's a lot of transgressive, progressive stuff that's hidden underneath both films that I think make quite the unexpectedly great pairing with one another.
Especially with 10 to Midnight, which, considering canon, I was kind of surprised how progressive it was at times. Also being insanely canon and more conservative, but then we're about to get into it. I have been dying to talk about this movie since Preston suggested it. Oh my God, my beloved canon, Jayla Thompson, Charles Bronson. We're going to be getting into it. Oh my God, this movie. The one-liners alone.
No, this one's a whole lot of movie. This movie's a whole lot of movie. It is the most movie I think we've ever talked about together. So
I really think it is, and we just talked about Prisoners. Okay, the curtains are opening. What are you going to show for the sleaze piece that is 10 till midnight?
Oh, definitely. So you did mention a director that we're going to be talking about quite a bit tonight, because he was the helmer behind 10 to Midnight. His name is J. Lee Thompson.
Yes.
And I want to start with something that would kind of liven up the tone after the dour philosophical nature of something like Prisoners, with the J. Lee Thompson movie, but with a lighter one. And I'm going to go with What a Way to Go, from 1964.
That's Shirley MacLaine, the sexiest gal in town. She has 6 times the manpower of any girl you've ever known. And just to prove it, 6 of the greatest guys on the screen go, go, go right out of this world with her in What a Way to Go. Wow.
Hi. Shirley MacLaine is my wife. In What a Way to Go. Wow, what a way to go.
She's my wife. What a way to go. She's my wife. What a way to go.
Yes, I love this movie so much. I love the fact that this man's man journeyman director directed this movie. I'm going to let you tell the plot because I love this movie to death.
Sure. Basically, this movie stars Shirley MacLaine, who is recollecting to her therapist at the beginning of the film. I believe who's played by Robert Cummings from Dial M for Murder, about her 4 marriages. And the thing is, she's been widowed 4 times. And so basically what happens is that there's the movie digs into the common trend of what happens when she starts off poor, she marries 4 different men, and she entices each man to be successful. And so as each man becomes more financially stable to being financially abundant, they lose, a kind of what passion in life is all about, and so they end up dying as a result. And so these husbands are played by Paul Newman, Robert Mitchum, Gene Kelly, Dick Van Dyke. There's also a really great performance in the film by Dean Martin, Margaret Dumas, who from all the Marx Brothers movies. She's Shirley MacLaine's mother. And there's so many great just side people in the film. And I love this movie because it's a dark romantic comedy. It's a 60s comedy where in a lot of 60s sex comedies, I feel like I have to almost overlook certain morals to enjoy them. I mean, I love the Hudson Doris Day films. I mean, Pillow Talk, I think is a wonderful comedy. But both What a Way to Go, I love how dark it gets. While J. Lee Thompson is able to flex his journeyman muscles he apes Frank Tashlin, that style that you see in The Girl Can't Help It movies like that.
Yes.
While he's also nailing the Stanley Donen style of musical numbers and even incorporating some silent movie visual signatures in there with how he's able to synopsize the stories of how she meets each man, excuse me. And it's amazing just how often Shirley MacLaine has chemistry with each of these 4 guys in this movie. And if you're a fan of J. Lee Thompson at all, I highly recommend checking this movie out. I saw it for the first time last weekend, and I just instantly fell in love.
The movie's amazing. I think it was on just the Discs episode. I think it was Brian recommended it, and I was like, what is this movie? J. Lee Thompson directing? Because the way he described it sounded like a musical comedy, which there is a musical element in it because you got Gene Kelly. And I love how with each marriage, the movie kind of changes genre. And I loved it. Edith Head does the costumes for this, and they are amazing. I mean, there's this moment where Shirley MacLaine is dressed in this pink dress with this feather thing on her head. So when she's, say, with Paul Newman, and she's in a French bohemian movie, she's in with Gene Kelly, it's more of a 60s musical. If you like J. Lee Thompson, I would totally suggest watching this because I don't think there's anything else like this he ever directed. And also if you like 60s comedies, Shirley MacLaine is hilarious because she grows up poor, but she doesn't want to be wealthy because everyone's going to say, you got to marry for money. You got to marry for money. She's like, no, I want to marry for love. I want that bohemian, simple lifestyle. And every single time she does, she picks this very talented guy who she just gives that thing to. They become insanely successful. She's like, well, I didn't want this life. I wanted us to be poor and you to be artistic. I didn't want to be seriously wealthy, and she gets wealthier with every single marriage. And she gets more miserable after it. It's kind of amazing. But this is such a delight of a movie. I love this movie to death. Looks good. It's amazing. You're right. Shirley MacLaine has so much great chemistry with each single guy. Dick Van Dyke on a pogo stick is the most. Oh my God, this movie is fantastic. Please watch it if you haven't. It is incredible.
Oh, it's so awesome. It's so awesome. I'm so happy that I think you recommended it to me. And then also I heard Cobwebs talk about this movie sometime a few months ago. So thank y'all for that.
No, it is. It is a hidden gem. It's what I adore this movie. I was like, oh, I need to watch more Shirley MacLaine movies that isn't The Apartment, because she's amazing in this. Right. For my first trailer, this movie's nothing like this. I'm going to go for the movie that took what 10 to Midnight did and then just went more with it, because it's Michael frickin' Winner. I'm going Death Wish 3.
Stop them.
It's collection time, Charlie.
3 murders, 4 rapes, 9 acts of random violence. This isn't a neighborhood, it's a war.
But there is one way. One man who won't be pushed. Charles Bronson.
What's the problem? Now you're gonna die.
It'll be just like before, Mr. Vigilante. There's one important difference. You're gonna work for me.
People have got to start to fight back and hard.
I sent them a message.
That's him. I'll take care of him.
Now he's in the middle of a war.
See what you've done? You got me mad.
In a world gone mad, there is only one law. His.
Yes!
The Giggler. Holy hell, this movie. I don't know. It's Death Wish 3. I can't say it. But it is Charles Bronson at his most Paul Kersey. It is everyone dies in this movie horribly. He's setting booby traps like he's goddamn at Home Alone. The villains are ridiculous. Like, it's telling some rich British guy, what do you think American gangs are like? And he makes Death Wish 3. Paul Kersey gets a bazooka delivered to his house. I mean, what is happening? It is an amazingly skeezy exploitation at its kind of most fun. It is Death Wish 3.
And it has a weird cast, because it's like Martin Balsam is the Alfred to his Batman, who's basically helping him set all these booby traps around his place in addition to the bazooka. Like, literally there's a straight up Adam West, I believe, like floor where like Paul Kersey picks up a piece of the floorboard and there lies a shit ton of weapons, like he's John Wick or something.
I know.
And then also Alex Winter is one of the thugs that he has to dispatch throughout the film. Marina Sirtis is in the movie, who is probably best known for playing Deanna Troi in Star Trek: The Next Generation. And actually, I feel like all the Death Wish movies have like weirdly interesting casts, to be honest. But Death Wish 3 is definitely the cream of the crop as far as the schlocky sequels go. I mean, as much as I dig 2, I feel like they really peaked with 3, and I mean, J. Lee Thompson himself took a stab with 4 to diminishing returns.
4 and 5, I think. I like both of them. They meld in my brain a bit the same, but it's just based. I think I can't remember it's 4 or 5, but one of them, Kirsty just decides, I'm going to go after this drug lord. I don't think there's even a reason. I think he just sees him. That's 4. I think he just looks at him and goes, you're dead, and then proceeds to fuck with him for the rest of the movie. Yeah.
No, it's a goodness. 4 is the whole thing.
Yeah.
That was almost my trailer was Death Wish 4: The Crackdown, but I'm going to revisit it now that I've learned that's on Tubi. But yeah, I mean, the Death Wish movies were were a big deal with my family, because my family loves Bronson. Once Upon a Time in the West is in my top 5 movies of all time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just love the hell out of Death Wish 3. I love this pick.
No, it is a really fun movie. It is so ridiculous. It is so over the top. It is just Oh my God. Yeah, it's Death Wish 3. I don't know how else to describe it. It's just Michael Winner is a lunatic. Yeah, that is what you get. What is going to be your second trailer for 10 to Midnight?
Oh, goodness. Well, J. Lee Thompson, I always, he's the guy who made the original Cape Fear, which I think we'll talk about pretty abundantly throughout the rest of this discussion. But for now, I want to do, in 1991, there were 2 remakes of Cape Fear. There was the Scorsese version, and then this other one is going to be my second trailer for tonight, which is Ricochet from directed by Russell Mulcahy.
Yes.
He was a psychotic killer out of control. Until a rookie cop.
Don't even try it, don't even think about it.
Put him behind bars. 7 years later, Earl Talbot Blake is out for revenge.
I got things to live for.
And the moment he escapes, the nightmare begins.
Earl Talbot Blake. He busted out of a parole hearing.
Now, the hunter is the hunted.
Alive, and he's here, and he wants revenge because I sent him to prison. I'm gonna make him pay for this. Where's Blake?
I love Ricochet so much. I'm very new to the Ricochet hive. I only saw it for the first time a couple of years ago, but it was one of those sleazy, cheesy good times that the first time I watched it, I literally went back and watched it again the same week because I just could not believe. Literally, if people don't know, it's basically about. All you need to know is that Denzel at his peak. Denzeliest, his early handsome days when he's just cutting his teeth as an actor, he gets John Lithgow's wildly weird killer locked in prison, and then Lithgow escapes and basically, much like Max Cady, wreaks all this revenge havoc on Denzel, where he ends up leaving him paranoid in some cases. Because while he's in prison, Denzel becomes this big shot DA. Denzel pretty much becomes Harvey Dent in the movie.
He does.
And it's almost like Lithgow is trying to force him to become Two-Face. And I mean, Ricochet's so wild, and I think it works for coming after Death Wish 3 because there's literally a scene right before John Lithgow makes his escape from jail where like he kills someone with a pen.
Yeah.
And then Denzel strips down naked the first time that he right before he takes Lithgow in. And it has the dumbest lawyers and cops in all of cinema in this movie they're only that way to make the plot functional for Denzel to get from point A to point B and look paranoid when we know he's going to come out on top. But it's just such a rollickingly interesting movie. I actually didn't know Fred Dekker has a story credit on this movie.
Oh, does he?
Didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah, Ricochet is an insane movie. Doesn't he have to get dressed up in a dress at some point? It's been a while since I've seen it.
No, that I don't know.
No, maybe I'm thinking of a different, but wouldn't be Denzel, because Denzel later on after Ricochet in 91 would go, no. No, I'm not doing that. But no, I just remember the way that, John Lithgow is completely unhinged. If you think he's completely unhinged as something like Blowout, wait till you see him in Ricochet. He is, oh God, crazy Lithgow is my favorite Lithgow. But yeah, it is literally, you kind of have to watch this man's life fall apart, but because it's Denzel, even in 1991, that he's going to come back and he's going to come back stronger. And he does. And there is still a kind of confidence, and it's still like, oh yay, Denzel's going to do his thing. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say. Even it is I'm still happy to see him, even though it's coming, to see that turn when he starts turning the tables on Lithgow. That is a fantastic. I need to watch this movie again. Yeah,
I need to too. 10 to Midnight had me in the mood to watch something very sleazy because I think, and we were talking about this a little bit off mic, but the thing about 10 to Midnight is that you expect it to almost be a little sleazier than it is, even though it's literally about Charles Bronson chasing a naked serial killer. But the movie has these ideas going on that make it interesting, and which Ricochet is not that. Ricochet is literally the bare bones of what you'd expect out of a schlocker piece, but it is totally a masterpiece of schlock.
It is. Yeah, I really love Russell Mulcahy as a director. I think he makes his movies look good. I think he's not afraid to go weird or big. Every time I watch a movie, I'm kind of surprised by something that happens in it, just in terms of tone. I really need to see Ricochet again. I think I'm going to have to move that up on the watch list. All right. Okay, so we're going to go not full circle, but we've started like light, colorful, brilliant with Shirley MacLaine. What a way to go. And then we've moved through Death Wish, the craziness, the sleaziness, and now we're going to go full serious. This was actually the original movie we were thinking of doing with 10 to Midnight, but I'm going to bring back Paul Dano and we're going to go The Batman from this year, 2022.
Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning. I've been trying to reach you. Find the God! This is a powder keg, and Rither's the match.
I can take care of myself.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left. I don't care what happens to me.
It's only gonna get worse for you.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart. Hear everything they say, ain't you?
You cue that amazing Bell score.
The Giancino, yeah.
Giancino, that's what I was trying to think. Yeah, score. I really like it. I don't love it as much as other people, and I don't despise it that's probably the wrong word. I don't dislike it as much as, say, Michael Scott. Actually, everyone does. I'm not going to lie, when you're listening to that monologue you hear at the beginning of the movie, I was a bit, oh no, it sounds like this is Abed from Community giving his Batman speech. What are we doing? Like, I'm not hiding in the shadows. I am the shadows. I'm like, this is something Dan Harmon would write. What are we doing? And then I got into it and realized, oh, we are in emo 90s grunge Batman territory. I think the movie does take itself a touch too seriously, that I found quite a bit of it funny. I don't think that's on purpose, but I did enjoy it. I do need to watch it again. But the whole thing with John Turturro as Falcone, I friggin' loved. The whole Catwoman stuff with Zoe Kravitz, I really, really enjoyed. And that if it only had ended with that conversation between Dano and Pattinson in the jail, I think that would have been perfect. But it didn't. It's a Hollywood blockbuster, so we have to flood Gotham.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying completely, and I've heard equal. I feel like this was a weirdly polarizing movie, despite being positively reviewed, and obviously it's a big success. I mean, it's getting a sequel soon. This is, full disclosure, my favorite movie of the year so far. Granted, there is not a lot of stuff in theaters right now that seems like it's to my taste at the moment. Because a lot of it is horror movies and Baz Luhrmann. But I can say with the Batman, the reason why I personally love it, and I get your criticisms, other people's criticisms, that it's super self-serious, that kind of thing. But we haven't had not only. It's not necessarily that it's a Batman movie that feels like a detective movie, even though I feel like it does that really well. But it's also a Batman movie that digs into the classicism and the propriety that the criminal underworld affects. I think what a lot of people disregard about serious crime fiction is that there's a social strata that is affected in tandem between the mafia and the people of each class system that is affected by said mafia. Because once you have a city like Gotham City, what I always found was so weird about Batman movies growing up was that we never really got into that.
Yes.
That aspect. We never really got into the criminal underworld. And I think that's something that Reeves and Pattinson do really well in the film. And also, too, to be frank, like there's just a lot of Batman movies where I feel like they're upstaged by the villains.
This is true.
And so I have a really hard time going back to like the earlier stuff for that reason. Like it's just like, well, I want to watch Batman. I don't know if I this is gonna make some people angry, but like I rewatched Batman Returns for the first time in a long time this year. I know. I wasn't crazy about growing up, and this year it left me a little cold. It really did. And maybe that's an off mic discussion, but with the Batman, I like how a lot more stuff makes sense with that film, and I really do think it represents the best of what crime fiction and what Batman stories have to offer. I do wish at this point we would stop getting as much dark Batman and we would start getting more of the Bat family.
Yes.
I do wish you
seriously, people, Nightwing.
yeah, Nightwing, Batgirl, Robin in the suit, not that whatever that Joseph Gordon-Levitt stuff was in Rises. But you know, like, I mean, to each their own, but I for what this movie is trying to do, I think it accomplishes that very well.
No, I think it does. There's a lot of it I like. Now, I've always been more of a rogues gallery person. I like the Batman villains, so I kind of prefer when they overshadow Batman.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So if you really like Batman and want to see a Batman story, don't go see Batman Returns, because Tim Burton does not care about. Batman is the pixie dream boy character to Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. And as a kid who liked watching creature features as a kid, Batman Returns was everything I wanted from a movie.
Interesting. Okay.
I never
that
grew
makes
up with
sense.
I never grew up with the comics. I've read a little bit, and the comics are very Batman centric. I'm like, yeah, but can we just have, and then the Killing Joke's the Joker, but yes, was kind of thing. And so that's kind of where I settled. But in saying that, I do love watching the fact that this is a Batman story. I mean, the first time he comes out, you hear the music and the Joker acolytes are all there. And I'm like, oh, they're going to get the snot beaten out of them. And they do. I love that scene. I love the fact that he's more of a detective. He's more around trying to figure out things like that. When he's walking into the room with all the cops staring at him is amazing. And I like the fact that he doesn't quite know what he's doing yet. He has to learn the difference between vengeance and justice, and actually being the symbol that Nolan movies keep talking about, being the symbol that you want to be, into versus I'm just going to go and beat the shit out of people because it makes me feel better. And writing in his emo diary about how he's the shadow.
The scene where Pattinson goes, whose blood, his or yours? Like that. Yes. Just, I'm like, that's like that was perfect. That was perfect.
Yeah. It's all that. And the fact that he's having a "you're not my dad" relationship with Alfred. And I'm just like, Alfred, this kid's a brat. What are you doing? But Alfred having that sense of, oh no, I am literally this kid's father. He doesn't have anyone else. And the fact that you said the class system is really shown in this movie, that conversation, especially between Dano, the Riddler, and he's in Batman. He's not Bruce Wayne mode. He's Batman, saying Bruce Wayne wasn't an orphan. He had no idea. He lives in an apartment in the sky. He was fully taken care of when his parents died. When my parents died, I had no one. I went to an orphanage where the rats ate my feet, were nibbling at my toes, I think is so he talks about.
Yeah.
Because these orphanages that were meant to help the city were being siphoned off by Falcones in the mafia. And then the cops were involved because everyone was making too much money off this thing. And I'm kind of a little over whether Thomas Wayne is a good person or a bad person. That's just me. But I love that idea of, because Bruce Wayne has always been, the poor orphan who had to come good. He's like, bitch, please. He had Alfred. I mean, that's not to say the tragedy that happens to Batman makes him. It does. But this is a kid who's been taken care of his whole entire life. He's giving back to the community. I think that's the lesson that Pattinson's Batman has to learn. It's not just about beating the shit out of people. It is literally about, okay, if I'm going to take care of this city, I have to do it the right way. And if I'm going to be Batman, it can't just be vengeance. I am not, he goes, by the end of the movie, he is not vengeance. So I get that, but that conversation hits that part when they're just, and Paul Dano's like, yeah, we're best friends. We're doing the exact same thing. And he's like, no, we are very different people. And it's also along the class line as it is how they see violence and how they suit their purposes kind of thing. Because I love the fact that the Riddler sees himself as a hero. I love it. I think that is so incredible that he goes, oh, no, I'm doing this for good. And it's like, you're kind of crazy.
And as some of our friends have said, like Paul Dano does look like he's like beat off a few times before each shot.
Oh yeah.
But I think that
he's particularly chinless in this, like Prisoners. He really, the accent, the no chin thing.
He's sweaty as hell in both movies. It's a whole thing. But no, I see a lot of what you've talked about that the movie does, which probably is tiresome to people who are a little over just like the general Batman origin story at this point. But I like how it combines the origin with a labyrinthine Prince of the City type of crime stories. So yes. I enjoy the movie on that level. But again, I mean, we're a little over halfway through the year, so my favorite could probably change. Who knows?
Exactly. No, I mean, I could watch it again and find much more because I've only seen it the once. So I could watch it again and then just find a whole bunch of stuff I love about it. I mean, there are some amazing, especially when you first see the Riddler and you just see his glasses in the dark when he's like camouflaged against the curtain is such a creepy effect. I love it. And then the fact that he wears glasses over his hood, I think is amazing. No, there's a lot to like in this movie. I just wish it wasn't so emo. It's so emo. I mean, they played that Nirvana cover like 3 times, don't they?
Yeah, they do. It's a thing. I mean, to be fair, it's a Nirvana song I actually really like.
Me too.
I dig it, but I can see how that would wear. But to be fair, like on the Batman movies that we all grew up with, like I mean, they crammed in like pop songs like crazy, like "Kiss of a Rose" by Seal. And I think it's
Thrill
Batman
Me, Kill
Forever.
Me. Yeah. I mean,
so I felt like there was a throwback to that.
Oh, no. I mean, the first Batman movie had a whole thing done by Prince. I mean, Bat Dance, for Christ's sakes. I mean, Batman and his film melody has been a connection with pop songs. And to have the Nirvana thrown in there was perfect. I just was just like, they playing that song again? What? You couldn't buy another Nirvana song? And I like Nirvana a lot, so it's just not that. But when he's just going there and he's like got glasses on, a black shirt, and he's eating like fresh berries, I'm just like, okay. Okay. And they're trying to show they are absolutely trying to show his privilege, even though he does not see it as privilege. But that was the most emo thing I think I've ever seen in my life. I'm just like, oh.
I will admit, 90s Michelle Pfeiffer would have made this movie a little better.
It would have. 90s Michelle Pfeiffer makes everything better, to be fair. No, when I first, that's probably why I love Batman Returns so much. When I saw her, I was like, okay, feminist icon. This is what I've been missing from my life is Catwoman. So even though she was like vacuumed into her suit and could barely move. Which sort of speaks about how Hollywood works. But I was oh God, maybe 11 going, oh my God, this is everything. But we're going to get into a movie which actually I'm going to argue is probably more feminist than I think Daley Thompson, definitely canon. This was purely by accident. I say this. They did not intend this. I just think the performance of Eugene M. Davis is so... You hate him so much, which means he did give a really good performance. He is so obnoxious, so hateful, so everything that there's a... Getting into 10 to Midnight.
A sensational crime. An airtight alibi.
We can't lay a finger on this guy.
And a chain of evidence.
Bring him in.
Charles Bronson is a cop looking for a killer, and he's running out of time.
Go ahead, take me in. You can't punish
face me.
When the guilty go free, the system is the crime.
I'm a mean, selfish son of a bitch. But I want to kill her, and what I want comes first.
Well, how come I've never heard him mention a daughter?
It seldom crosses his mind that he has one.
He's one angry man with someone to protect.
How long are you with your father?
He can make a difference.
You like hurting girls?
I won't answer that.
Girls won't have anything to do with you, but you get back at them, don't you?
I won't listen to your filth. Gotta remind you about evidence obtained under duress. It's inadmissible, Leo.
We got no evidence and we can't hold this kid.
He's our man, Captain. I'm gonna get him.
Because he is so vile that the fact that these women have a very sexual positive women, they keep saying sleep around, but they just living their lives. He is so awful. There is no judgment on them because he's just such an asshole, which is very weird for 1980s, which tended to like go, well, she did sleep around a bit.
Yeah, no, it's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this movie was those elements that I think are a lot of people miss whenever they especially first watch this movie. I think a lot of people remember 10 to Midnight for being a flat out sleaze fest, and I think it definitely is that.
Oh, it is that. That's not negating anything. It's sleazy.
Oh no! Like you get lots of sexual lewd moments and dialogue and definite moments of nudity. It's very much, especially in the first half, I would argue that it's very much a standard, in the best way, a standard Bronson vehicle, in that he's a detective this time. He's not an anti-hero, but he's someone who you can tell that Bronson is always thinking something. You can tell that he's constantly skeptical of what's going on, especially in regards to the series of killings that are happening in this city that they're occupying, him and his partner, where things aren't making a whole lot of sense. I mean, when he picks up the infamous sex toy and interrogates Gene Davis about it, it's for jerking off, ain't it? You know, like it is. It is just it's a thing of quotable glory, and the movie's filled with these lines like that. And Thompson co-wrote the script that he directed, and I didn't know until this rewatch that he even wrote some of the scripts, because I've always saw him to be a journeyman. But among digging into this movie for research, but also watching a couple more like J. Lee Thompson movies, and he's been someone I've admired for a while, and I know that you and I have commiserated before on being kind of admirers of his. I believe you're a big fan. Where he directed Guns of Navarone, he directed the aforementioned original Cape Fear. He made what I think is one of the best Apes movies pre-Rise, which is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I think that movie is so damn good.
Conquest's amazing. I love Conquest. Yeah.
It's so good, and he's just made so many great films, and really interesting movies, and I think 10 to Midnight is far and away one of his most fun. So much so to where Bronson would work with him again in Death Wish 4. And what I love most about it is that it's Bronson being Bronson until you get to the second half. When the second half of the movie happens and you finally become aware that, or Bronson finally becomes aware that Gene Davis is the killer of all these women. He takes the law into his own hands, and he very much uses his detective clout to become Hugh Jackman in Prisoners.
Yes.
In fact, I would argue that he is just as much Keller Dover as much as he is Detective Loki in this movie.
Yeah, there's a definite switch, because when you first meet him, he's a by the cop book. He keeps telling off Andrew Stevens, who plays his partner.
Right.
And no, you got to do it this way. You do it this way. This is how cops work. But as soon as he knows he can't get Warren, who's played by Eugene Davis, the very naked serial killer, he switches. He's like, oh, I'm going full I'm going to be planting evidence on him. I'm going to be changing evidence. I'm going to literally the famous ending, shoot him, because I think Warren is very similar to Robert Mitchum's character in Cape Fear, as in he knows the law, so he knows how to get away with things. Though nowadays, I think if he tried to plead insanity, I don't think it would work. I think he'd still be found guilty.
Right.
Because everyone just looking and goes, oh, such a dickhead. But he's that kind of character that knows how to manipulate the law, so the law doesn't work, which is a fundamental thing in the 60s and 70s when you're dealing with vigilante movies. The law just doesn't work, so you have to take it in your own hands. And so
Bronson says in the movie, I remember when legal meant lawful. Now it means loophole. And when that scene happens, it's like, whoa, dude. It's so good.
Yeah, it's so good. I mean, you go back to Dirty Harry. The whole point of Dirty Harry is that he's the cop who's going to get things done. He's not going to pay attention to the law. And when you watch it now, you're like, okay, that's criminal. That is definitely what you're doing right there. Very criminal right there. That is not good. But at the time, it was sort of seen as the 70s. Crime was up in the States. You had a time of high interest rates, a huge recession. Yeah, I know this is all sounding very familiar. But
shots fired.
Shots fired. Though I'm looking forward to the good movies that we'll be getting from this period, though, because the 70s were amazing. But in terms of that, and there was a lot of protest, second wave feminism, again, very sounding familiar, civil rights, being demonized, like the Black Panthers, that kind of thing. This is all happening in the States, and I know it's sounding very, very familiar. So you get these movies, and I think 10 to Midnight is kind of just on the cusp of when it really goes full Reagan, when people were just becoming sections of communities were becoming incredibly wealthy, so you didn't necessarily need to break the law. I mean, this is there was a vigilante group in the Neighborhood Angels or something, I can't remember what they called, were very violent. They would go and beat the shit out of people. But it's because they were just, everything was just coming, everyone felt everything was coming undone, except for the people who were maybe not living in those areas, I'm going to say. And I think that's kind of the reputation of that. But I think this is kind of weird, and also, which is definitely exploiting that. I mean, Death Wish 3 exploited the hell out of that. And I think this movie does. It's very sleazy. It's very exploitative. It's saying this cop who, you could tell, I love how tired he is. Like his first line is, I'm a mean son of a bitch. Sorry for my terrible Bronson impressions. But
I'm a mean son of a bitch. Yeah.
He's tired from the get-go. Like he's when they're driving with his partner, I love, he's just naming everyone in the neighborhood he knows intimately. He knows all the terrible things that happened to them. And so when something's kind of getting into his neighborhood of his friend, his daughter's friend being brutally murdered, he's like, oh no, this is affecting my community, my family. And it's just another one of these things. You can tell he's always thinking about the next step. So when he switches to Dover, it's like, okay, I have to do this. And now I have the power to do it. It's not just, I can't. It's like, oh yeah, I have the power to ruin this man's life, even though fully deserves it, by the way. I'm not feeling any sympathy for Warren. I mean, he is a serial killer, misogynist, Ted Bundy-esque, asshole who I would gladly see be put in prison, and I don't feel sorry for what happens at the end. But it's because he brings Leo down with him, which I think is kind of the point. As you said, he's in the hole with Hugh Jackman.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what I really dig about the movie from that angle is that Bronson goes full Hugh Jackman whenever his daughter is directly affected by it, as opposed to indirectly affected by it. Because you alluded to earlier how I believe his daughter's name is his daughter's friend's name is Betty Johnson.
Yes.
She's the first victim that we see Warren kill, and that's such a creepy scene. And I'm happy to be talking about this movie with a woman because I felt super uncomfortable how they're at this movie. He's basically there to make his presence known before he commits the act.
Yes.
And when you watch the movie subsequent times, because I first saw this several years ago, this is one of those Bronson classics I'm very, very new to, versus some of the others in his oeuvre. But one thing that got me during the first watch, and I remember, was I was like, he's obviously going to kill these women, because I've heard about this movie for a long time. I know what this movie's about. He's at a movie screening.
For his alibi, by the way, and that whole thing.
Yeah.
I think this is the first murder you see. I don't think this is this character's first murder, because he's planned everything out meticulously. It is
meticulously, yeah. And it takes Bronson overstepping the law in order to catch him. But after establishing that alibi, he goes to the toilet, he strips naked, and then he proceeds to basically watch Betty and her boyfriend make love, and then that's when he kills him, and then chases her down, makes her feel that victimization before he kills her. And I find this killer so interesting. I mean, I found that kill, first off, to be very well filmed.
Yes.
Which, it's weird for me to say because this is just such a grimy, dark subject matter. But J. Lee Thompson wants you to almost indulge in that sensationalism. Like he's having that neon score go on as all this is happening. The moment you see the ludicrousness of Gene Davis just running around, just like Chris Pontius and Jackass.
Yes. That is
and,
really good. Yeah.
Well, I kept thinking that during this revisit. I was just like, man, like this he really did pave the way for Johnny Knoxville and his guys. No, I'm
really,
kidding,
yeah.
But
yeah, we'll get into that later.
Definitely. Well, but it's one of those things where Warren as a character is so interesting because he is this misogynist creep who, much like goodness, I hate to tie things to real life in this way, but
this movie does.
Well, there's so many murders in history. I mean, you brought up probably one of the bigger ones, Ted Bundy, you can throw in Jeffrey Dahmer in there and others, where they look visibly, they look like you're typically, handsome, womanizing men, but they are so dejectful of women. And you can tell through Gene Davis's performance that he's been so soured by women for a long time. And I say not soured by women to say that I'm pro incel or anything of that nature. Quite the opposite. But I think this movie is almost an early commentary on the incel movement.
It is
in the 1980s, in the Reagan era, in the context of a movie that its lead star is the star of so many conservative-based action movie fare. The fact that your villain is made to be very sympathetic. Do I think that the movie is necessarily brainy in other regards? No, obviously not. And I don't think J. Lee Thompson intended for it to be that way. But I do think he intended this movie to be a lot more dense than it looks, just based on how Gene Davis's villain is portrayed. And there's huge swaths of the movie, especially again in that first half, where you're just watching him meticulously set up these murders in this Michael Mann sort of way, where it's not as fetishistic as Michael Mann often does with showing, like the science of safe cracking or the practicality of setting up a heist or anything of that nature. But you get to see Gene Davis's mind at work. Like I love the moments where he just has his gloves on, and he's plotting out his next steps to where his next victim is going to be and that kind of thing. Not because, not only because he doesn't want to get caught, but because he really wants to make a statement. And I think that's what makes him such a memorable antagonist for Bronson is that everything he does, it's forming an alibi, it's making a statement, it's plaguing a community. He wants to leave a legacy, and it's like at the I don't want to just keep fast forwarding to the end, but when he talks shit to Bronson, basically trying to defy his own fate by going up against Bronson and his gun after Bronson's done all these things to further subjugate him outside the legal system. It's the last gasp of Warren as a character trying to battle the status quo of, okay, I have to be a man, so I must respect women at all times, even if they are emotionally abusing me, even if this is happening, even if that's happening. And I'm very thankful that this movie is, I guess, a little older than the modern trend, because I think, just judging by I'm not sure what your thoughts were on Joker, but
I have thoughts.
I feel like this movie would be like have a Joker-like following had it come out now.
Oh, yeah. I think it's fascinating this movie came out. I mean, first of all, I want to say J. Lee Thompson is a consummate craftsman. He does things well. He's a kind of man in that way. He doesn't fetishize the technique, but he likes to workman-like show you. So he's really trying to get you into Eugene Davis's character's head, which is not a good place to be. But the fact that this is 1983, just as Reaganism was taking off, this is the time of just say no. And I know that was for more drugs, but I think that was for everything. It's like when America gets into this weird, again, this is going to sound familiar, when it goes into this weird puritanical era that it so loves to, I say this as someone who does not live in America, who knows enough just to be dangerous. When America decides to go into this weird puritanical-esque thing, which happens every couple of decades, like in the 50s and the 80s, and now we're seeing it again. And it was just about to go into this thing. And in a Reagan-esque era, you could make lots of money, you could have freedom, but God forbid if a woman stood up for herself. You saw it a lot more in the 70s, and then they quickly just went, nope. And then it's happening again with a few other things. And this, Eugene is not pissed off these women sleeping with multiple men. He's pissed off that they're not sleeping with him. And that comes across really, really clear because he's purposely hitting on women that he knows are going to reject him. Like in the movie theater when he's... that woman's friend in the striped top would be all for. She'd be happy to hang out with him. She's like taking his popcorn. The other girl does not. And that's the one he's leaning on. It's trying to give him this justification of, oh, these women are rejecting me. Therefore, I'm going to take it out on them, which is this very incel idea of women keep rejecting me. And it's like, no, I think you're purposely going, one, you're probably an arsehole. So that's what's happening. And two, you're going for women who you think you're entitled to, not that actually forming a relationship with. And people can sense that. And it's just this weird kind of thing. And I love how J. Lee Thompson just lays that all bare. So there is no, because I think Joker kind of wants you to feel sorry for the Joker. I think the movie really wants you to empathize with him without doing the work. It's kind of trying to have it both ways. He's the worst, yet you need to feel sorry for him, and there's no connect in the middle. Like Prisoner has that connect in the middle. Yes, I'm appalled by everything Hugh Jackman is doing, but I understand the thought process leading up to this. Joker's just meant to be pure chaos, but you're meant to feel sorry for him. I'm like, well, actually, you're butting heads, and yeah. So I think with Warren, there is no way you feel sorry for this person. Every inch of this man is an asshole. And so you can actually understand a lot of Bronson's frustration when he cannot get this guy. He cannot prove it. He's even got the sex toy, and this is for jacking off. He even gets the whole thing as his knife is his penis, which may be one of my favorite lines in the whole movie. Apart from I hate quiche, or I thought it was cake. I thought it was pie.
Oh no, he goes. I thought it was pie.
I thought it was pie. It's like, why did you put coleslaw with pie? It's so weird. And Bronson, your decision making is not very good.
Lots of weird food talk in this movie. Chicken. I like chicken.
I like chicken. Just, I think Bronson was just stating his food preferences in this movie.
Pretty much. It was between that or like plugging the next Family of Cops movie that he was in. I think there's like 6 of those.
Quite a few of them were directed by J. Lee Thompson, by the way. I mean, those two worked together quite a bit in the 80s. So I think this movie, and this is canon, by the way. Canon was a very right-wing company. I mean, yes, they're some of I love Canon to death, but when you sort of have a look at kind of the ideas and things that formed within their, just had to look at Invasion USA. I'm like, yeah, this is very much on that sort of side of it. This is what Golan and Globus kind of thought about the world. And then you just get this very weird accidental progressive thing because J. Lee Thompson is such a craftsman. He's going to show every character as they need to be within the movie. And I love that. It's not, I don't think the movie's trying to be left or right. I don't think it's making a political statement at all. I just think that's how we look at it now. I think there is no way you can live in 2022 without looking at 10 to Midnight and look at it from that view, even though I don't think that was on any of their mind when they were making it.
No. I think one of the almost perversely magical things about this movie's existence and the way that modern cinephiles have kind of given this movie a second life in recent years is because you're right. Like Gene Davis's character, like he's not empathetic. He's a piece of shit. We look at him as an incel because that's our language for describing these types of people that we get on the internet now. And I think that phrase is also amplified by the anonymity that a lot of us have faced by certain people that we come into contact with, meeting each other through the internet, etc. So
exactly.
It's like if Warren was online, he would be DMing people on Twitter, basically, talking about, restore this or restore that kind of stuff, or hashtag this, hashtag that. Why do girls not like me?
Yeah.
And with Bronson, through Bronson's displeasure he's displeased at just how smart and how functional Warren is in regards to how he's able to meticulously create crimes as well as get one up over the other suits in the interrogation scenes. I think it's a testament to Gene Davis's weirdly not quite over the top, but still heightened performance, where he's able to get one up on Jeffrey Lewis and Wilford Brimley, full-on veterans of this era of film, and then you just buy it.
I forgot that Wilford Brimley was in this movie, and I was so happy when he showed up, just shuffling around, like probably being 45 but actually looking like he's 80, going, yeah, the body's over there. Yeah, I'm like, Wilfred! It's glorious. No, I think you're right. I think it's a really strong performance. I think that's kind of why we zero in on him. Just because we have newer terms to describe things now doesn't mean that they haven't been there. It's just that there's a term now that is more readily used to describe, to encompass the whole thing. There were other words that you would have for Warren. I think, dickhead, misogynist, Leo, as Bronson uses a whole terms for them. But it's... but I love it how he kind of steals every scene he's in because he's just so skeezy. And I'm not just talking about the nudity thing. It was actually really weird. I remembered him being nude a whole lot more. And then I got to the final sequence. I'm like, oh, there's a whole lot of butt in this movie. The camera's really like this showing, the camera's on his ass. But the thing is, when you see him naked, it is so uncomfortable. When he's chasing Betty at the beginning, that's one, it's ridiculous. Because it's two naked people running through a forest, and that just, no matter how well J. Lee Thompson shoots this, it's still a ridiculous scene. But also it's terrifying because there's a naked man with a knife chasing a woman. And that's what you're going to remember.
Who's also naked.
Two very vulnerable people for very different reasons. And...
well, it's the opposite of the beginning of Jaws, where the shark is in its element when it's taking out Chrissy,
yes,
who's just gone skinny dipping, I believe, in the beginning of the film, and of course that's probably the most iconic movie poster ever is that kill coming into fruition. But this is the opposite. This is a naked killer who's almost in his element when he strips down his clothes.
Yes.
And it's almost like he's using his innate sexuality as to transform himself into that alter ego, so to speak. And it's very interesting.
Yes.
It's very interesting how that happens, because what my brain always goes to every time I watch this movie is that it reminds me of when I watch a vampire film. Where in all of the best vampire movies that I've seen, granted, I've seen very few of the classics, but you think about the Near Darks, you think about the Fright Nights, movies like that. The way that those killers become vampires, it's almost like they're sexualizing their deadly appendages, and that's kind of what Gene Davis does here. Granted, you don't see this is such a I'm sorry, Lindsay, this is such a weird conversation to have, but you don't see, thankfully you don't see all of his member in the film.
You see flashes of it. I'm thankful. No, ahead of my notes, there's a really weird way that, the penis is a metaphor that's been used over and over again in films, from vampires to serial killers to anything. It's kind of, a lot of men make movies, so it comes up. But no, I had in my notes that there's a weird way that he shoots the nudity. It's either right in the butt, or it's kind of this flash of the side between his hip, where you're just kind of looking at him from the side, which is really unnerving, by the way. I don't know why that unnerved me so much.
No, it's I find it unnerving because it's kind of like watching because there's a lot of movies from the 70s and in the 80s, so to speak, like this one, where like you'll see a lot of flashes of like women's body parts.
Yes.
And I think what Thompson's doing, in a way, and perhaps I'm reading too much into it, feel free to call me out on my bullshit if I am, but it's almost like he's doing that with the symbol that this movie is letting you know that, like you said, like the phallus is the weapon that Gene Davis uses to proliferate his crimes. Like, even though he's not, you don't necessarily see an assault of that type in this film, or maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but because I watched this the day before last.
There's no actual rape. He stabs, which many people have always sort of said the knife is the phallic thing. So I think that is, but the fact that he's naked just adds a thing to it. I don't know. Fair enough. I just wanted to clear that up before I made a statement, but that's what I mean. It's like Thompson is adapting what we find the male gaze in a lot of these canon films, a lot of these exploitation films of the period, and he's using that as the imagery to fuel our hatred and our disgust for what Gene Davis does. And I have to applaud Gene Davis because I've read from quite a few sources that he was so uncomfortable every time he got naked for this movie. I do not blame him.
It's a weird scene, and I mean, I can't say I blame him for doing this movie. I mean, you're in a Bronson Cannon Group vehicle. I mean, hey man, you got to eat. Yeah, that's all I have to say. But I think he brings it. I really do. I think his performance is a little uneven at times, which is the case for a lot of movies of this type. But I mean, he's entertaining as hell to watch. I'm not gonna lie and say he's never boring, is what I'm trying to say. No, I think that's really important.
He's not. And when you see him when he's naked and he's just got blood on him, there's something very visceral about that image, which I think J. Lee Thompson was capturing as like, because my partner walked in halfway through finishing, and then he knew it was a canon movie, and he goes, "That's not Chuck Norris." I went, "No, it's Charles Bronson, it's the other guy." So he instantly knew it was a canon movie. And then it makes question, why is he naked? Because I think it was when he was in Lisa Albacher, when all her roommates are being slaughtered. Laurie. And he goes, why is he naked? It's like, oh, forensic. And he just looked at me and went, babe, this is a Cannon movie from 1983. Do not start questioning the science on this. They hadn't really they haven't got DNA yet. I mean, he's trying to cover up fibers. And just the look he gave me, I was like, that's not going to work. I'm like, it's canon. What do you want me to do? They just said, can we have a movie where the guy runs around naked? That would be cool. And they went, sure, here we go. Do you really want to
it made for a cool Shout Factory cover.
It really is. I mean, the final shot when Lisa Albaca is running down the street as fast as she can because she's just trying to get away from this lunatic. He's just chasing her down the street fully nude. It is an amazing sequence. You're just like, that is a thing that happens in a movie, and I am all for it. It's
it is a great sequence. Like that chase scene is so well done, and I think something we keep talking about J. Lee Thompson's horror thriller stuff. What a Way to Go notwithstanding, but I think the action that he did in The Guns of Navarone is so good for a movie of its type, especially in the era that it came out. I mean, he's having Gregory Peck and David Niven throw knives at Nazis and do naval battles, and there's gunfights and all kinds of crazy stuff and going on in that movie. And I think you see a lot of that here, where this movie, the action is not going to blow you away. It's very much, you're not watching 10 to Midnight for set pieces of that type. It's very much a standard in a lot of ways procedural. But I think the way that Thompson frames shots, I think the way that he is able to build tension through clues and through the mystery, I think it points to his, like you said, master craftsman past that precedes this film, because only someone who is great at blocking and setting up shots in the Hollywood machine of old would be able to make a movie from Cannon look this good. Because I mean, there's other Cannon movies I've seen that don't look, very few look as competent as this, and the only other movie I can think of is probably Cobra, which is George P. Cosmatos aping the action style that was going on. But that movie is a masterpiece of visual splendor. I think it's called vulgar arturism, I think is what people have coined it.
Yeah. That makes sense. And with Cobra, crime is the disease.
I am the cure. I love that movie.
Oh my God. A movie exploiting a situation that probably was, oh my God, especially 1980. Oh my God, I love Cobra. Cobra's amazing. The pizza snipping got me into the movie. The whole death cult with axes just kept me there. I was just like, what is happening? Why is she putting so much ketchup on her fries?
Can you imagine if J. Lee Thompson made Cobra, like how different that would be?
Masterpiece. And I love Cobra because I think George P. Cosmatos is actually a really solid director. He did get chosen by actors who really wanted to direct their own movies a lot. But the way the guy knew how to set up shots and everything like that, he needs credit there. I mean, yes, Sylvester Stallone was probably calling a lot of the shots on that movie, but you cannot fault the craftsmanship with Cosmatos. But but I got a sneaky suspicion that J. Lee Thompson would not put up with the shit that Stallone would have pulled on that movie.
No, and I think that's what makes Thompson suitable for a movie like 10 to Midnight.
Yes.
Whereas Cobra, I feel like as much as I love it, and Cobra is legitimately one of my favorite movies of all time.
As it should, because it's amazing.
It's so good. Like Cosmatos was that guy. I mean, part of the reason why he was brought in for Cobra was because him and Stone had a big success on First Blood Part 2 the year prior.
I forget that he directed that. Yeah.
Yeah. And Cobra's weird in that it began as a Beverly Hills Cop movie. And then Stallone.
No, it was. It wasn't type. It was Beverly Hills. Beverly Hills Cop was meant to have Stallone and was meant to be much more serious. He fell out of the project for some reason. They got Eddie Murphy in, which the rest is history. And then he went and made Cobra, which was kind of what his idea of Beverly Hills Cop was meant to be. So
Yeah.
It's the cover poster in Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Sure. Oh my goodness. I just watched Beverly Hills Cop 2 recently, and man, that
movie.
I love it. I love it. I like it a little better than the first one, and I love the first one.
I love the first one, but 2's more of a hangout movie. I could have those three hanging out all day.
Yeah. I mean, they both go hand in hand. If the first one is an undisputable classic, so
yes.
people, love that more. I completely get it. I just love Tony Scott, and I love what he brings to the second. But you're right, it's definitely more of a hangout movie. But going back to 10 to Midnight, it's weird because Lisa Albarker is in the first Beverly Hills Cop.
She is too, yes.
And I'm curious, like, what happened to her after this era? Because, like, she's like, she's charming, she's sweet, she adds a layer of warmth to both of these movies that she's in, and I'm curious, just like, I feel like every decade has some really great, memorable character actresses that they eventually just, like, they're not as prominent anymore. And I'm just, I wonder what happened with that, because I love the whole cast of this thing, top to bottom. I mean, I think, God, what's his name? Andrew Stevens is doing great, really thankless work being Bronson's sidekick. And I think Bronson, who, you could argue is not necessarily acting, but playing himself in a lot of roles. I think he's actually utilized, especially this era. It's like, I'm just going to spew off lines that are going to become GIFs on Twitter 30 years later.
And I'm just going to say what food I like and what food I dislike. That's what I'm doing. And now I'm going back to my trailer.
That's true. No, but Bronson's kind of, I think much like Cobra, Bronson kind of slumming it as far as not necessarily, giving one of his best performances, but giving a very giving a very physical enough performance, giving a performance that the role doesn't demand a lot of range out of him until his daughter is full on endangered in a really creepy phone scene. And I just love the way in which we see Bronson, like the way that Thompson zeroes in on how smart Warren is with how meticulous he plans the crimes. I love how it zeroes in on Bronson going into the crime scene room and figuring out, okay, like, what's this blood doing here? Okay, and then going to the interrogation room. Okay, well, the blood is actually on this victim, and it matches him. And then Gene Davis, in a very hilariously insipid sequence of dialogue, he goes, he's lying, I didn't do this. It's just, that scene is so canon, but I love it. I love it so much.
Particularly canon. This movie slides from being such a canon movie. Like, I love the, because you're sort of going back to being, if Warren was around today, he'd be, hashtagging and all that kind of thing. But he's the guy who does the anonymous phone calls, and he pretends to be Latino on top of it. I mean, it's, and a really horrible accent. I'm like, what is happening? Which is so canon. But at the same time, I love the fact that is when Andrew Stevens and Lisa Albarker are sort of on the phone, he's encouraging her to try to figure out, get a little bit more out of him. And then they're at the party and he's like, he still has his gun on him. It's like, I do love their little chemistry. And I think it is a very thankful role that he's given as being just the nice sidekick. But as the movie goes on and you see the wheels falling off Bronson, he's the one who has to step up and go, okay, no, you taught me how to be a good cop. So now I have to be the good cop. And he's the one who arrests him in the end, isn't it? Or is it someone else?
Yeah. No, he's the one who makes the arrest.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Andrew Stevens is the character who looks at Bronson after the court hearing, after the verdict is made. And he's just like, dude, like, what did you do? Like, did you plant this, essentially? And then Bronson's just kind of like, well, I had to do what I had to do. Legal used to mean law, and I had to do what I had to do, essentially. Yeah. And you see the worry in Stevens's eyes to see the partner that he looked up to, the partner that he learned, basically who he's kind of modeled his burgeoning career off of. And there's, and I don't know, like the movie doesn't slow down ever. I think the movie is paced very well.
It is paced very, very well. Yeah.
I think we can say that about both movies. I mean, even though Prisoners is long, and I think it's so heavy and dour to where you do probably feel length at times, depending on your mood. I think the content is just fine in that film, and I feel that more so at 10 to Midnight. I think there's too often that exploitation can be kind of it can run the risk of being dry because there's like two amazingly sensational scenes, and then the rest is just kind of dead air. Whereas yeah, and I don't feel the padding in this movie. In fact, I would say that this is the Paddington 2 of canon movies. I'm kidding.
Oh man.
That was so bad. That was such a bad pun.
I nearly got upset there for a second. No, I agree. No, this is no. I will say with J. Lee Thompson, he knows how to make a movie move. And he is working a lot more in exploitation in the 80s with his other Death Wish movies, even in the 70s when he's doing some of the Planet of the Apes movies. But time to get into sequels, they are very much for your drive-ins kind of thing. They are not like the revolutionary movie that the first one is. They are very much for the science fiction geeks who want to go to the drive-in. But they are really good movies. I'm sort of saying that's the area he was kind of working in. Time you get to this, it's not The Guns of Navarone, it's not Cape Fear, it's not Something's Got to Give. It's these kind of more genre pictures. But he kind of knows how to keep it moving. He's taking those lessons he learned from his war pictures, from his Cape Fear, how to keep things moving, how to keep things interesting, how to develop characters, how to edit, how to be in the editing room and knowing the flow. So when you do get to something like A 10 to Midnight, which is meant to be sleazy as all hell. The whole premise is there's a naked serial killer, cop must find him, you get slasher-like kills because it's 1983 or 1982 when they're probably shooting it, and slashers were the big genre of the time. So those kills are very slasher-esque. And J. Lee Thompson actually did direct a hell of a slasher, Happy Birthday to Me, where he does the exact same thing. Yes, the ending you have to rewind 3 times because you do not know how you got to that point. And I think that's the bulk of the movie. It's just like, wait, I was here, now I'm here. What happened? And it tries to go back. I'm like, nah, still not buying it. No, I'm not buying this at all. But I still love it.
That one's been on my list for a long time. I need to finally. I'm going to make a point to watch that very, very soon.
It's way more psychological than a lot of slashers of the time. I will say that. Even though you will rewind the ending to go, wait, how did we end up here? No, there were no clues. No clues were left. Kind of thing. But I think he's really aware of how a movie is meant to move, and it's that very classic way of how a movie is meant to move. And he's very, again, I keep saying with word craftsman, yes. Villeneuve is the artist who wants these grand themes. And again, I did not notice the 2.5 hour runtime with that because you're so invested in these characters. But he wants you to think while you're watching, which is why he's leaving these punctuations. J. Lee Thompson does not care about that. He just wants point A to point B. How do we get here? Does that make sense? Yep, we'll do that. And he knows he's got a good cast to carry everything along. I'm not diminishing that in any way, but I'm saying he's there to do a job. He's there to make a movie, and he's going to do it to the best of his ability. And I would say he is the one that makes 10 to Midnight great.
He's to me, he's the real star of the movie. As much as this is a Bronson vehicle, I think what he does with Bronson is what makes this movie pop. I think what he does with a naked serial killer premise is what makes this movie what it is. I think this movie, I can't think of any other journeyman who was working with these kind of sleazy genres who began making these award-winning movies in the UK and eventually the US, who could pull off a movie like this and make it make sense and make it as entertaining as it still is today. And I will say too, I do think, unlike Prisoners, unlike a fine film, quote unquote, I think this movie would actually be perfect for a remake.
I was thinking that. I have that in my notes. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Great minds, LOL. Because I think if you got someone like, I don't know, Fincher in the 90s, early 2000s, or someone like if I'm trying to think who would have a thirst for this kind of thing, because you would have to get really in. If you were to make this movie in 2022, you would have to get really in the weeds as far as the intellectual implications of what Gene Davis is doing, because he is very much, I mean, we have a name for what he is now. And the movie would have to very much be about that if you remade it. And I don't know who would be a Bronson, or if you get like a Kyle Chandler to just like be a bland lead. I love Kyle Chandler, by the way, but I think Chandler, I think too often is Chandler wasted in roles that are where he's just the typical lawman. I think you would need someone of, you might hate me for saying this, but maybe someone like a Dwayne Johnson to kind of pull back the comedic stuff that he kind of does too often, and bring back some of that intensity from his earlier career. Because I mean, 10 to Midnight was a success to my understanding because it was a Bronson vehicle, you know. So you would need a marquee actor to go up against a naked serial killer.
No, I think you're right, because he did do that movie back in was it Falling Down? He did the remake for that, which is pure exploitation. I think
Walking Tall.
Sorry. Falling Down, another movie. But yeah, he did do that. So he has it in him. Yeah, Walking Tall, finally saw it. Finally going down the list of rock. Well, that's way down the list. Right next to Tooth Fairy and before Welcome to the Jungle. That shows what Google thinks of that movie. It's kind of this thing. So he has kind of done that before, but I think he would be really interesting. But I think with the implications of how we talk about incels, and also how we talk about police overreach, I don't think he would do it. I think this is a man who wants to run for president one day, because he's done a show which is about him running for freaking president. And I think he said as much, that he wouldn't want to, because as much as I think it's prime for a remake, I think there's a big thing on how, because in the 1970s, police weren't doing enough. Now they're doing too much. At least in the States, again, this is an outsider point of view, but there's an over-militarization and an overreach. So you have to deal with that when you've got a cop blatantly planting evidence on someone who you know is guilty. And I think that would be a really, who you know is an incel, and you know is, you could deal with so many issues with this movie, and you could do it well. I just don't know who you would cast or who you'd get to direct something like this, because you need someone who loves exploitation, but yet knows how to elevate it into something that, and then you'd make this movie that would just have about 16,000 think pieces, which would be, oh my God, a nightmare on it. But I think it's actually, I reckon Dan Stevens could be a good one for that, actually. It may be too pretty, but...
Ooh, like as the killer?
As the killer, yeah.
I think that would be awesome.
Those steely blue eyes and
that
conflict of like, I'm seeing you naked, which, yes, but also yikes. I don't know who you'd get the Bronson character at all.
Maybe, oh man. Maybe, I'm trying to think. Gosh, I should have came more prepared for this. It's the tough one. I would say possibly, I don't know why my brain keeps going towards like generic macho guys, but like, even though I love this guy, but like I was thinking, honestly, Vin Diesel, if I'm being honest, like I know, like I'm going out on a limb here, but I think Vin Diesel has enough of a, on screen at this point in his career, he has enough of a lack of a personality to where that could suit Leo Kessler really well, especially if he's juxtaposed against Dan Stevens. Because I think the magic of 10 to Midnight on a performance level is that it's very much Paul Kersey trying to be a cop, but then he ends up cursing out whenever like the killer's not being subjugated enough for his liking, and he becomes more distasteful with the law. I think, but now that I say that out loud, maybe I would have to redact my Vin Diesel-ness, because with Diesel, I think he would rest too much on being the prima donna.
He would.
And yeah, I just don't know if this era has a Bronson, and maybe it'll come to me after we record, but I just don't know if we have it. I don't know.
I'm actually going to go with Idris Elba, which I generally cast him in everything, like the new Doctor Who, the new Bond, the thing. But I think, and I'm saying this because he has played a character, Luther, if you've ever seen the British TV show about a corrupt cop.
Oh yeah.
Which he's amazing in, and I just can do no wrong for me. But I think he'd be perfect. He'd be perfect, and to have that kind of, yeah, I think he'd be perfect. To be fair, he is my go-to for casting anything. I'm just like, just put Idris Elba in it. He'll be great. I mean, he's Stringer Bell. He's Luther. He's yeah, he can do no wrong, even in terrible movies. And I think he can pull himself back enough when he needs to. And I think he can go full charisma when he needs to, which is, to be fair, which is what Charles Bronson did a lot during his career.
True. People underrate, I think, Bronson's ability to be charismatic on screen. Because when you watch him in, I don't know if you've ever seen the Walter Hill movie Hard Times.
Not yet. It's on my watch. It's on my watch list. I need to get onto that because I've heard that he's 52 and cut.
Oh, he's so like, yeah, he's so cut, but also like the way that Walter Hill uses Bronson, it's actually, I call it Bronson's Rocky in a sense, because it's about bare knuckle boxing versus boxing. And it was originally supposed to be a vehicle for Steve McQueen and his wife, Alan McGraw. But because Steve McQueen kept basically trying to dominate the pre-production, Walter Hill basically kicked him off, even though it was his directorial debut. He had enough power because Walter Hill wrote The Getaway, which I think is a solid, decent McQueen movie. It's not one of my favorites of Peck and Paws, but the thing is, Walter Hill was like, "You're trying to dominate my production, and your wife can't act, so bye." And so he gets Bronson to replace him. He retools it to be a Bronson vehicle with his wife or a partner at the time. I don't know if they were married yet. Jill Ireland.
Yes, I was going to say Jill. Yeah.
Who I've always found to just be way more charismatic on screen than Alan McGraw has ever been.
Yes.
And Hard Times really does utilize that. Bronson is stoic for a lot of the movie, but he is charming when he needs to be. And he's put up against James Coburn in the film, who is loudmouthed, very showman, just is full of showmanship and bravado. And Bronson very much represents the real bravado. So I love that movie for Bronson. I'm a huge fan of The Mechanic as well. Like that's a movie that I think is unfortunately forgotten in the shadow of the Death Wish movies, but I think it's possibly Michael Winner's best film, specifically because, once again, he's using Bronson in a manner to where he's silent for the first 17 minutes, as he's taking out a hit, and you're watching the setup and the deconstruction of an assassination take place. And as he's paired with a really young Michael Vincent, you get so many great action scenes and just a lot of really interesting dialogue from each actor. So I think Idris Elba falls into that more often than I probably think of him as. So yeah, I kind of regret saying Vin Diesel now. So I will put a sock in my mouth for that.
No, me and Dan were watching this street food in America show, and they were looking at Hawaii, which I'm like, I need to get to Hawaii. Oh my God. But they were talking about the different street foods and street trucks there, and it was amazing. And there was this family this guy who obviously loved Vin Diesel with all his heart in the Fast and Furious movies, and the same amount of times he'd go, family's important. You don't leave family behind. And he even think he said, I don't have friends, I have family. I'm just like, oh, that is the sweetest thing ever. But no, I think he is that. I think he can command a room, and I think Bronson could do that. Yes, time to get to the 80s, he's getting a little bit. Well, this movie, he's tired at the beginning, and that's the whole point of his character. He perks, and when he's actually, because what I love about this movie, and I think goes back to J. Lee Thompson, is that this movie gives time for both Andrew Stevens as Paul McCann and Bronson to be with Lisa Albucker as Laurie. They form those connections. So when the movie does turn into its third act and she is in danger, you feel that necessity of what he's actually doing, because it's not just him trying to protect the public, it's him trying to protect his own daughter, who's now in this psycho's crossroad in his eyesights. And yeah, I think that Idris Elba could really convey something like that, and also take on all the other things you have to talk about if you're doing this movie. It's one of the disappointing things about the Death Wish remake, was that doing a vigilante movie nowadays is such a fascinating concept to me. And I'm kind of surprised we don't have more of them, especially after Black Lives Matter, sort of saying, okay, so if the law isn't working, what do you do? And I think it's because of Marvel, we don't have that, because they have all the superhero movies, which is technically that. But they have capes, they're fantastic, they have superpowers, all that kind of thing. But I'm surprised.
Right.
I'm because I know a lot of women we have some rape revenge movies from the female directors and female creators and all that kind of thing. I'm kind of waiting for that to come up as well. But I'm just wondering, is it because of Marvel we have it, or we just don't have it? So I think there's an interesting thing of what you could do with a remake to 10 to Midnight, which would probably piss off everyone, to be honest, but I think it would still be fascinating.
I think to your inquiry, I think part of it is Marvel, but I think it's also because one of the reasons why Marvel has been so successful financially, not in terms of quality, because I think you and I have talked before about how this post-Endgame phase has been very lacking in some regards.
Yes.
To say the least, in terms of quality. But I think the rise of the Marvel era has been, and I think we're finally seeing kind of a downfall of that. I think what we're getting into with the success of the biopic resurgence that we've gotten these past several years, among other genres, is that more people like yourself are wanting to are yearning for something a little meatier, a little more adult from their mainstream fare. I think we're getting at a point now where it's like, okay, like we want The Northman, we want Prisoners, even if people don't connect with these movies like some of us do. The fact that these movies exist the way that they do, and the fact that they address the issues that they are within genre, I think a 10 to Midnight remake wouldn't be a killing if you get the right lead and the right actor for the villain role. I think that's something that I mean, you made a kind of a joke earlier about how 70s drama gave way to really interesting fare. You know, everyone loves 70s film because it's how the demise of the studio system gave way to more auteur filmmaking for the time. And I think we're starting to see that. We're starting to see way more filmmakers in different genres. I mean, you brought up the Black Phone earlier, which I meant to get a word in about, which I loved personally.
Oh wow!
I did not expect to love it as much as I did, and I think part of it is because the magic between Scott Derrickson, C. Robert Cargill, and Ethan Hawke, they speak to me in a way that most people in their genre often don't. And I think it was that human quality of focusing on the child abuse, what children go through, very much literalizing what the stories of how both of my parents always recollected their experiences growing up in the 70s versus the kitsch that the 70s is often depicted against. Like, the movie avoids that. And I love how it uses the supernatural element as to basically just exemplify its metaphor that the whole movie is allegorizing. And I think and that movie just hit so many pleasure points for me. And so yeah, I think we're starting to see more stuff like that, because I think that movie's broken like several box office records just by being a modern horror film that's not tied to an IP. And I think that's really fucking rad. I really do.
Yeah, because I think we're sort of heading into a new studio system at the moment, because Disney's just, well, it's Disney, and I think other studios are copying it, the fact they're buying movie theaters and all this kind of thing, and putting actors onto quite large contracts. But this is the month where I think broke records since like before the pandemic. And it shows that there are actually multiple kinds of movies. You do have the Black Phone, you do have Elvis, Top Gun Maverick, not just the Marvels. And I think this is interesting because I think, I haven't really loved a Marvel movie since Endgame. And I think because I was like prepped up for Endgame really, really well. So as soon as I get this I am Iron Man click, I'm like, and on your left and all that. As soon as I hear the phrase on your left again, I'm like bawling my eyes out. And it just, that had so many kind of things I was prepped for. And this one, I'm like, there is no plan, is there? It's not just the pandemic. I know the pandemic probably had something to do with it. There's something else that I don't think there's something else. And to sort of see the fact that Maverick's making all the money, to see that Elvis has made 200 million worldwide. The Black Phone did really well. Makes me kind of happy. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, other things can think. And I think, and movies always reflect the time period that you're talking about. And I think there will be some more interesting adult, messy movies coming out. And usually that is within genre, first of all, and then you see it spread to sort of be more mainstream. But the fact that we do have something like Prisoners and then something like 10 to Midnight, which was meant to be pure schlock. I mean, and it is. I'm not denying that. My still favorite friggin' line is the way he says his knife is a penis. Is so fucking great, even though it's the text of the movie. Like, yeah, we get it. He's naked. He's got a knife. We know what this is.
There's no subtext in this movie.
There is no subtext.
It's just text.
The movie's the thing is, I think the movie's trying to have subtext, but it's like, that's not subtext. That's just text. I don't know what you think you're doing. But both movies have kind of become more interesting as they've gotten older, which is what I love. I think same with Prisoners. I think people will go back to Prisoners. I will go back to Prisoners and keep going, oh, so this is actually, this is much as a destruction of the family unit as it is much about child abuse, as it is as much about taking the law into your own hands. And kind of the same with 10 to Midnight. It is about certain cultural things that we have given very now new terms to, which haven't really changed their meanings. They've just kind of made it more front and center. So you say a word and go, oh, okay, I know exactly what that is.
Right.
Instead of having to use a couple of words or a couple of references, which I think we had to use before. Incel is a much clearer term than, say, misogynist is, because misogynist doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a killer or I don't know. Incel is a much more clearer term, and toxic and all that kind of thing are much more clearer terms in certain contexts, or just in any context now. And I think that's absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
Well, and I think the word incel, has taken. I think the word has become malleable enough to describe different types of ostensibly the same types of flawed individuals and individuals that I certainly want to avoid in my real life. And and
any life.
any life, right, because I feel like they're born on the internet. but goodness, a lot of incel dishing out tonight. Sorry incels.
I don't say sorry.
No, but they're just gonna uncover this podcast and be like, man, they really don't like me. No, no, but I think what you're saying is true. And I think if it wasn't for guys like J. Lee Thompson, who really were able to exemplify the diversity and the variety that comes from just being a competent filmmaker and knowing how to just tell a story, tell a fun story, tell an interesting one. One that skirts the edges of humanity. You get a movie like Prisoners that's able to dig deep and cut deep into humanity to the point to where, again, like I even today, like I was watching a couple of scenes on YouTube just to refresh myself for this conversation, and I found myself again just tearing up again at just the sorrow and how realistic the inner turmoil with those characters is. And I think you see glimpses of that in 10 to Midnight, which is why I thought they would make such a great pairing. I think both of these films, I think if you are going to watch Prisoners but still have an itch for a noir-y police procedural Fincher light kind of movie, I think something along the lines of a J. Lee Thompson movie from this time period will kind of wash it down like goodness, like the way red wine washes down like a serving of fish, essentially.
Yes, or a really nice steak. Like you get the meaty kind of thing and just get this really nice red wine. No, 10 to Midnight has it both ways. I get the absolute pure silliness and schlock of it all. I mean, the kills are ridiculous, everything about it. Some of the line reads, some of those little moments, Charles Bronson being just epic. And yet I can watch it from a time where things have changed and we know certain things more. I'm like, okay, this movie is posing fascinating questions that I don't think have any easy answers to them at all. And if this movie was made today in the exact same context, with the exact same way with Charles Bronson, the think pieces would be, I would avoid the internet. It's like Body Heat, if you've ever seen that, when William Hurt is smashed in the chair to get to Kathleen Turner. The think pieces that scene has created since, when people go back and say, well, that scene, I'm like, yeah, when you take that scene out of context, it's very dodgy. But when you actually put it into what she's doing and what she's trying to create this man to be, is actually really fascinating. And I think I might say Body Heat's probably a better movie than 10 to Midnight, but I think they're both doing very similar things on how they did not think how certain images would mean in today's terms. But I think it makes them more interesting.
Oh yeah, I mean, Body Heat is very much. It's actually, goodness, I'm surprised I didn't think about that all evening. But I think it's actually pretty similar to 10 to Midnight in that it's recontextualizing a very old school type of plot, like the Double Indemnity 1940s Billy Wilder scenario of sexual conquest, murder mystery.
Yeah,
but it's doing so in a way that's you can only do in the 80s, but it's so timeless because it's genuflecting to the past. Whereas 10 to Midnight is extremely aggressively so 80s, but part of the charm of the movie is that of how 80s it is, while also pointing ahead towards moral quandaries that we're kicking together now. And I think I'm beyond grateful that I was able to be on your show again, to basically kick over these concepts, unearth a lot of truths that both of these movies tonight bring to light today and how it applies to our human condition. And I hope that more people, if people haven't seen either of these movies or both, or maybe you haven't seen them in a long time, I think they're well worth a revisit. Because I think 10 to Midnight in general is just at the very least, I think is just a super entertaining, rewatchable sleaze fest of a movie that it's definitely some of the most fun that certain people are having in front and behind the camera. It's one of my favorite solo Bronson vehicles. I think it's just so much fun. There's so many, butt shots that are like tattooed to my brain and not on purpose, but I guess they are if I keep rewatching this movie, which I will continue to do. But,
almost Danny Steinman level butt shots. I mean, Danny Simon did not care who was the butt owned. He would get in there. This is Danny Simon level. And speaking of pure schlock, but it is, oh my God, Friday the 13th, Part 5. I can't even remember the other two movies, which I dearly do love. Linda Blair, that movie, oh my, it's the inappropriateness of the sexuality compared to what the movie's talking is actually about is tremendous.
Wait, are you talking about The Exorcist? Or
no, shoot. Danny Steinman, I have to look it up now. Danny Steinman is a sleaziest director. We did actually direct porn, so that
that tracks.
Yeah, if you see Friday the 13th, you're like, yeah, that track Friday the 13th, Part 5, that tracks. Savage Streets. It's got Linda Blair from 1984.
Huh.
Oh my God. You want to see, okay, someone kills someone by okay, she's pregnant, by the way. This woman, because it's about these two kind of gangs, one female, one male, who could take a turf war too far, and which leads in the horrific assault of Leanna Quigley, which juxtaposes against something else like this is not okay. And then you have someone picking up another female character who we've been told is pregnant and about to get married, like she's in friggin' WWE, and throwing her off a bridge. Linda Blair has a crossbow and cannot light a cigarette. Oh my God, this movie is insane.
I have got to see this movie. This sounds like I'm looking it up right now. I'm pretty sure Savage Streets. Here we go. Please tell me it's on Tubi, please. This sounds like a Tubi.
It sounds like it's very Tubi. Yeah.
Okay, it's not on Tubi, but I'm going to see if I can hunt this down from like a library or something, because this sounds extremely awesome. And it has John Vernon. What?
Oh yeah, I forgot it has John Vernon in it.
Oh my goodness.
Principal, it's seriously one of the most insane movies you'll ever see, and you're just watching it with your jaw on the floor going, someone got away with this? and then he went on to make the masterpiece and one of my favorite Friday the 13th Part 5. My blessed insane what the hell is happening in that movie.
Okay, I do like Part 5. I'm not gonna front. I do really. It's been forever since I've seen it, but I remember like once it hits like goodness, like I mean once it hits like 5 and 6, like I feel like that stretch was like my favorite of like my marathon that I went on several years ago. I mean 6 I just adore. Yeah. And then I think it's 7 where it's like, is it like Jason versus Carrie basically?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Where he's going up against a telekinetic woman. No, but I didn't know that the director of 5 was kind of a journeyman in his own right. So this is a rabbit hole that I have to go off of.
Yes, I've not seen any of his porn, but I have seen his 3 movies that he made. And schlocky masterpieces they all are. I think the unseen gets a little bit boring at times, but it has like insane cast. How the frick did he get? Anyway, yes, watch Savage Streets. You will not believe it. Oh my God, I'm laughing at it, but there's one scene that I genuinely felt very uncomfortable. I'm like, no, do not film. You'll know it when you get there.
Fair enough. Go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah. Anything else you want to say about 10 to Midnight before we wrap up?
Honestly, guys, if me and this lovely host, if we didn't sell you on the movie enough, definitely check it out. If you have a thirst for this type of film, this type of exploitation, this type of just cheesy B movie awesomeness, it's a B movie that's told by a borderline, A-level filmmaker.
Yes.
Someone who went from making some of the most interesting genre movies of the old Hollywood system to making some very interesting exploitation fare, and ending his career, uniting his craftsmanship from before with the cinematic language that was developing at the time. And I think it's really cool to examine 10 to Midnight, but also, man, I mean, it's meant for you to have a good time. You can just go into it on that level and enjoy it. And yeah, I just think it's a violently sleazy good time.
No, it really, really is. I adore 10 to Midnight. I think it is just a sleazy good time where you do kind of want to have a shower just because oh my God, so much but it is and I'm reading a lot more into this movie than I think was ever intended. I know people who expecting a thing on 10 to Midnight did not expect me going on a political diatribe. But I just think watching it now, you can't help but think of that. But at the same time, J. Lee Thompson and the guys who made this movie were not thinking about that. They were thinking about a poor cop constricted by all the rules and all the smart criminals that could get away with shit. But it's an amazing movie. I mean, you will not believe your eyes in a lot of it. And it's got a great cast. I mean, Wilfred Brimley, even Kelly Preston shows up to be murdered at one point. Lisa Albacher, Eugene Davis, who's just sleazy as all hell. Yeah, it's a great movie. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on and suggesting it. I was so excited. I've been excited to talk about this movie for months. So I'm finally glad that we've got to it, and it's great.
Yeah, no, we've been pushing this back for a hot minute.
We have been, yeah.
But I'm glad that we finally did it. And Lindsay, as always, thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much for coming on. And as usual, it is an absolute blast. Yeah. So before we go, please tell people where they can find your good work.
Sure. Find me on Twitter. If you're on Twitter at PRESTOMIT. And find me on Letterboxd. I'm always trying to plug away at watching movies and writing reviews about them at PRESTO_MITCH. And love you guys. Thank you again for having me, Lindsay. This was a lot of fun.
No, this was a blast as usual, and I can't wait to get you back for another double feature. I know we have a few things in the air that we'll be discussing, and it's going to be awesome. Thanks, guys, for listening. And we will be back with another double feature. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.